In this video, I'm going to figure out which legendary bird is best for a solo playthrough of Pokemon Yellow. Playthrough rules can be found in the description. This is the season finale of my Pokemon Yellow series, and it will be the last Generation 1 video of the year. It'll start up again in February, so stay tuned for that. Now, let's talk about the legendary birds. I find it surprising that in Generation 1 these three don't share a base stat total. Starting in Generation 2 they do, so Generation 1 is the only time where this is true. Of course their names are based on Spanish numbers, and the base stat totals reflect this. Articuno has the lowest base stat total, Zapdos is right in the middle, and Moltres has the highest. I'm going to start examining these playthroughs sequentially, so Articuno of course is up first. For base stats, it has 90 HP, 85 attack, 100 defense, 125 special, and 85 speed. This gives it a 16.41% chance to crit. All three of them have the slow growth rate, but I think their stats will make up for this disadvantage. Due to their typings, they don't have very expansive move pools. Articuno has a fantastic starting set of Peck and Ice Beam, and then through level up it gets Blizzard, Agility, and Mist. Through TM and HM it learns Bubble Beam, Water Gun, Ice Beam, Blizzard, Swift, Sky Attack, Rest, and Fly. Having Ice Beam, Brock is going to be quite simple, so I don't need to do any optional battles in Viridian Forest. Defeating the mandatory Bug Catcher levels Articuno up to 6, and then I head into Pewter City to face the first gym leader. Geodude is first and it has very low speed, so Articuno moves first and Ice Beam takes it out. The experience levels Articuno up to 7, but this isn't enough to outspeed the Onix. It starts things off with Tackle, but just misses and then Ice Beam one-shots. So that was an extremely easy first gym, and Articuno gets an initial split of 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Normally when I structure these versus videos, I always switch to the next Pokemon after the previous one has got its first split. I think this is the best way to introduce Pokemon at the beginning of a video like this, go through all their base stats and get a sense for how they're going to do in the playthrough. But Articuno crushed Brock so quickly, let's continue with it until it defeats Misty. On Route 3 I face the first Bug Catcher, and during this fight I want to do a back sprite review. I'm connected to this one by intense nostalgia because Articuno really did a lot of work in my very first playthrough of Pokemon Yellow, which by the way was my first ever Pokemon game. Despite having looked at this thing for hundreds of hours, I never noticed the one janky black pixel on the right hand side that extends one row down. When I was filming this video, I actually had to go online and look up if this has always been the case, and yeah, that little pixel has always been there. This doesn't entirely ruin the back sprite for me, but it's the only thing that I look at every time I see it now. By the way, if you can't unsee this, I am not sorry. I don't want to jump the gun, but these back sprites are only going to go downhill from here, so this is about as good as it gets in this video. In Mount Moon, I pick up the TM for Water Gun and teach it to Articuno right away. Throughout the rest of the cave, I only fight one optional trainer, the Hiker with 3 Rock Ground Pokemon. After that, I face the 2 mandatory trainers at the end of the cave. They're very easy for Articuno to defeat, even though it's only level 13 and then eventually 14 by the time it's defeating Jesse and James. Next is Cerulean City, and here there's always a choice that the player has to make. Are you going to face Misty right away, or take on the rival on Nugget Bridge? I think for Articuno, since it is fairly underleveled, the rival makes more sense. Plus, 34 speed is very ideal for this fight because his lead Spearow has 33. Because my legendary outspeeds, Ice Beam one-shots, and of course it also takes out the Sandshrew, so I don't have to worry about Sand Attack. The Ice type continues rolling his team, one-shotting the Rattata, but the Eevee does survive. It gets a crit with Tackle, but it doesn't do very much, and Articuno knocks out his ace. Things are going as I expected them to, very easily. When I sat down to start filming this video, I expected that Articuno was going to perform the best. That's because when I was a kid, I used to use it almost exclusively to defeat the entire Elite Four. The only exception to that is Lorelei, because Ice-type moves are not very good against her Water-Ice types. The Ice-type is just so fantastic offensively in Generation 1, especially because here, Fire types do not resist it. One downside to having Ice Beam as my primary damage dealing move is the fact that it only has 10 PP. That said, as I journey through most routes, I'm going to pick up restoring items, and I can use these to just keep going so I don't have to backtrack to any Pokemon centers. With Nugget Bridge and Route 25 complete, I go into Misty's gym, defeat the junior trainer, and now it's time for the second gym leader. If you're new to my videos, you can look in the top left to see the effective power of all of my moves. This is calculated using the move's base power as well as the same type attack bonus, and then the type effectiveness between that move and the opponent's current Pokemon. This is not the same as how much damage a move will do, but it's a good way to get an estimate for which move choice is the best. Very counterintuitively, here Ice Beam is going to be doing the most damage when compared with Peck. The first turn it's in battle, Misty's Starmie hits a Bubble Beam, which actually does surprising damage. It made me really want to get a freeze with Ice Beam, but I don't. However, the Starmie just uses Tackle and Water Gun, which isn't enough to finish Articuno off. It gets a second split of 10 minutes and 17 seconds. Its first split was very fast, and its second one is quite respectable. But Zapdos, on the other hand, might struggle with Brock. For base stats, it has 90 HP, 90 attack, 85 defense, 125 special, and 100 speed. If you remember Articuno's base stats, it had 85 in 2 of its values, but Zapdos has 90 in 2 of its values, so it has 5 more base stats in total. Also, due to its higher speed stat, it has a 19.53% chance to crit. The real downside for this thing comes in the form of its move pool, because it starts with Thunder Shock and Drill Peck. Now, Drill Peck is a great move, but it is resisted by Brock's Pokemon, and Thunder Shock can't do anything to them. Through Level Up, it learns Thunder, Agility, and Light Screen, and through TM and HM, it gets basically the same moves as Articuno, without the Water and Ice moves, instead having Electric moves. That said, this Electric type has several advantages, especially when compared with other Electric types in Generation 1. First, it is the only dual-type electric Pokemon in the entire game, and the addition of the flying type means that it takes no damage from ground-type moves. This is such an advantage, I cannot understate it. We're going to talk about it a lot more as the playthrough progresses. Second, it starts with Drill Peck, giving it really good damage against all of the bugs in the forest. And third, its crit rate, which is roughly 1 in 5, is hopefully going to give me some really big hits against Brock's rock Pokemon. In order to train for him, I fight all 4 bug catchers in the forest, bringing Zapdos up to level 9. Because of how the Pokemon damage calculation works, it is far more advantageous to face Brock at level 10, so I'm also going to face the junior trainer in his gym. Drill Peck is able to one-shot the Diglett, and it takes unfortunately 3 hits to knock out the Sandshrew. But it does give enough experience to get to level 10, so now let's see how Brock goes. I'm hoping that I'm going to knock the Geodude out and preserve a decent amount of Zapdos' health. Right away a crit occurs, which does more than 1/3 in damage. Geodude's tackles are doing 4 damage to Zapdos per turn. My next Drill Peck takes it to orange health, and then I get a second crit, knocking it out in only 3 turns. I still have green health remaining for the Onix. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Zapdos' critical hit spree continues. On both turn 1 and turn 2 against the Onix, I get one, and then it goes for Bide. If I attack into this and the crits continue, Zapdos will be knocked out, but luckily I have Thunder Shock. Since it does nothing to the Onix, I can just buy time. After all, Zapdos is faster, so I can do this whenever it chooses Bide. When Onix unleashes absolutely no energy, then I can return to using Drill Peck. Still, I'm not out of the woods yet, because Onix is lowering my defense with Screech. When it hits with Bind, it is doing 4 damage per hit. Luckily, this only lasts 3 turns, but its next tackle takes Zapdos down to 12 hit points. Drill Peck chips away, taking the Onix down to red, and it uses 1 more tackle, but Zapdos survives with 3 hit points and finishes Brock off with a critical hit. The electric type gets a first split of 4 minutes and 10 seconds. This result is so much better than I was expecting. Maybe, just maybe, Zapdos is going to put up a fight against Articuno. On Route 3, I fight the minimum number of Pokemon, which includes fighting this lass, walking back to Pewter City to reset her position, and then fighting the Bug Catcher. In Mount Moon, I grab the rare candy, and then I fight the Bug Catcher, as well as the lass that is just north of him, because they're both very fast experience for Zapdos when it's using Drill Peck. This is my first playthrough with Zapdos, and if you're a new viewer to the channel, you won't know that I'm going to do a follow-up playthrough later to get more accurate results. Whenever I'm exploring the game for the first time, I tend to play overly safe, just so I don't get stuck somewhere and lose a lot of real time resetting over and over. With electric types specifically, there are a lot of moments where you can just get completely walled, and so I am playing fairly tentative with this legendary bird. You can see that once I reach Cerulean City, inside of Misty's gym I face the junior trainer, and then I backtrack and face the swimmer as well for a little bit of additional experience. Remembering that the electric type does not resist water type moves, I even backed out of the gym altogether and fought the rival on Nugget Bridge before Misty. Against his Spearow I go for Drill Peck because it has slightly lower physical defense when compared with its special, and Thundershock and Drill Peck have the same effective power. Sandshrew could be very annoying with Sand Attack. By the way, in Generation 1 this is a normal type move, but even in Generation 2 and on, when it gets the ground type, it can still hit flying Pokemon. Luckily, I only get hit by Scratch, so no accuracy drops for this fight. Drill Peck 1 hits the Rattata, and 2 hits the following Eevee. I continue to the end of Nugget Bridge, picking up my HM user Charmander, as well as TM45, which is Thunder Wave, and I do teach it to Zapdos just in case I need the status move. I think it's also worth bringing up this Hiker because he has a Geodude, and fighting Rock-type Pokemon initially seemed like it would really slow Zapdos down, but Drill Peck is doing roughly a third to the Geodude before it sets up Defense Curl. Also, because of my high crit rate, sometimes I'll bypass stat changes, so I end up knocking out the Geodude in 3 turns anyway. Okay, it's time to face Misty. I put this one off far too long. Against the Staryu, I use Thundershock, and I get a 1-hit. Next is Starmie. Because I'm playing overly safe, I use Thunder Wave to paralyze it. After all, these two were speed tied, but with a status condition, I'll always be moving first. My first Thundershock does half without a critical hit, so I definitely should have just attacked right away. And with that, Zapdos clocks in with its second split of 11 minutes and 23 seconds. That's a little bit slower than Articuno, and I think that's mostly because of my overly cautious approach, and the fact that Zapdos was slower coming out of Brock. Okay, so it is time to introduce the last of the 3 legendary birds. This one is the final one you obtain when doing a regular playthrough, and as such, it has the highest base stat total. Earlier in the month, I did a match which was very similar to this, Jinx vs Electabuzz vs Magmar, and in that video, the fire type was able to achieve the fastest result. In the middle of the month, I did Raikou vs Entei vs Suicune, and once again in that video, the fire type got the best result. So today, things are looking very good for Moltres. I don't have a lot of fond memories of this thing because I usually just boxed it whenever I was playing the game, but I don't know why because it's honestly fantastic. For base stats, it has 90 HP and defense, 100 attack, 125 special, and 90 speed, giving it a 17.58% chance to crit. Of the 3 legendary birds, this is the highest base stat total, but also the best distribution of stats. You really don't need Zapdos' speed or Articuno's defense. Having higher offensive stats means more one-hits, and that means less time. Like Zapdos, the fire type when paired with the flying type eliminates one of its weaknesses, which is to ground type Pokemon. It's also worth noting that since Brock is the first gym leader, and none of his Pokemon have rock moves, Moltres' double weakness is not going to be tested that much throughout this run. For a move pool, it starts with Peck and Flamethrower, and then learns Leer, Agility, and Sky Attack. It has the most limited TM and HM set because Flamethrower is not a TM in this game, but it can still learn Fire Blast just in case I need a little bit more fire-type damage. Even though Brock's Pokemon resist Flamethrower, it's going to do so much damage to them because they all have really low special stats. So on minimum battles at level 6, I face the first gym leader. Is this what you were expecting from a legendary fire-type Pokemon? Yeah, because this isn't Moltres. It starts with Peck and Fire Spin, and has no way of learning Flamethrower. Well, unless you trade your Moltres to a Crystal version player, and then they use the move tutor to teach it Flamethrower, and then it gets traded back. In the past, I've got comments saying this isn't possible because the game checks to see if Moltres can learn Flamethrower, but no, that's not how it works. It just checks for moves that didn't exist in Generation 1. Usually it goes without saying in my Generation 1 challenges, but trading my Pokemon to a different game and then receiving them back with some kind of upgrade is not allowed. So Moltres doesn't get Flamethrower, it's going to have to rely on Fire Spin, and believe me, this move is really awful. It has 70% accuracy and 15 base power. That said, trapping moves are quite good in Generation 1 because the opponent is unable to move while they run their course. Provided the user is faster than the target, it may be the case that you can chain this move infinitely. If you watched my Arbok versus Weezing versus Muck video, you will have seen me utilize Wrap in this way to great effect with the poison type snake. I was also able to use it with Tentacruel to great effect, and then in my Charmander video, I completely wrote off Fire Spin as just a trash move, and some people commented that I really shouldn't be. After all, I was using Wrap. Isn't Fire Spin just the same with a little bit less accuracy? And the answer is no, that is really not how odds work. To really understand this, let's do a little bit of math. In one scenario, the Pokemon is going to be using Fire Spin with a 70% accuracy. In the second scenario, the Pokemon will be using Clamp with 75% accuracy. And in the third scenario, the Pokemon is using Wrap with 85% accuracy. For the purpose of understanding, let's say each one of these moves requires 10 hits to knock out its target. And if the target has a chance to move, the user will faint. What is the chance that Fire Spin has to hit 10 times in a row? Well, it is a 2.82% chance. Clamp is slightly better with a 5.63% chance, but Wrap is fundamentally different. It has a 19.69% chance to hit all 10 times in a row. This table shows all of the numbers from turns 1 all the way to 10, and I hope you can see just how much more consistent Wrap ends up being. This is why I didn't want to use it with Charmander, but unfortunately today with Moltres I am going to have to. Because the first new move that I'll be able to learn is technically Bide, but the first useful new move I can learn is Rest on the SSN. The first decent damage dealing move that I can get is Swift just after Rock Tunnel, and then I am probably going to want to teach Fly, despite its 95% accuracy. I have recently learned that Fly is better starting in Generation 4, but in this game it only has 70 base power. You might think that it would be better to just use Peck because it's going to hit every single turn, but that really isn't the case. Fly is going to be getting more one-hits, which means less damage taken by Moltres, and it's also exposed to fewer status conditions. This is incredibly important for a solo challenge, especially when the opponent team counts start to get to 4 and 5. For Moltres, I take nearly the same path that I did with Zapdos, training to level 9 by the time I reach Pewter City. Moltres has exactly 24 speed, so I figured I would be fine against Brock because I'm going to move first against both of his Pokemon. Okay, Fire Spin, please do not let me down. And turn 1, it hits. I have to chain this move to knock out both of his Pokemon. Notably, this is the only Fire-type damage-dealing move in the game that cannot inflict a burn. While we watch Moltres whittle away at the Geodude, let's talk about this back sprite. Articuno's had one bad pixel, but I think everything in this one is just bad. The beak doesn't look really right, its head shape is oddly round. The hair that is supposed to be fire on its head looks so awful, and then it has these two little chicken wings down at the bottom. I think this might be my least favorite back sprite in the entire game. It really doesn't communicate that Moltres is an intimidating legendary Pokemon, and I guess that's fitting. I surprisingly don't have that many misses with Fire Spin, and Moltres clocks in with a first split of 4 minutes and 3 seconds. So the Fire type was faster than the Electric type, but that's gonna stop because Misty is coming up next. On Route 3, I fight the Bug Catcher who has 4 Pokemon. This is the best experience yields that I can get here while still doing minimum battles. In Mount Moon, I face 3 optional trainers, the Super Nerd, the Bug Catcher, as well as the Lass. When defeating Jesse and James's Pokemon, Moltres levels up to 16. I'm keeping my eye on its speed stat because I'm going to need 57 in order to move first against Misty's Starmie. Of course, it makes sense to face the rival next. I'm going to use Fire Spin on the Spearow just to hopefully prevent it from using Growl. Same scenario for the Sandshrew, I really want to avoid Sand Attack, so Fire Spin is the go-to here. Luckily for me, I get a critical hit, and in Generation 1, multi-turn and multi-hit moves deal the same damage across all of their hits. So Moltres takes out the Ground type in only 1 turn. From there, the fight gets much easier, so let's proceed with Nugget Bridge. I want to mention this Lass. Yes, I'm starting to have to talk about random trainers. She could be problematic because her first Pidgey knows Sand Attack, and I am not able to one-hit it. In this run, she isn't an issue. At the end of the bridge, there is a Rocket, and the Ekans traps me in Wrap, wasting some time. Then the Zubat uses Supersonic. Luckily, Moltres doesn't hit itself, and I get through this fight as well. With Articuno and Zapdos, they were just one-hitting everything here, so Moltres is fundamentally different. I once again get a critical hit against the Hiker, and this is helpful to knock his Geodude out quickly using Fire Spin. Okay, so now it is time to head back to Cerulean City after completing Bill's house, and now Moltres' speed is 49. That's not enough to trap Misty's Starmie, so I think I need to head to Vermilion City now. In my way is the Innocent Bystander Rocket, and his Drowsy puts Moltres to sleep, which is really annoying. Luckily as a legendary I have a lot of health and good special, so its most potent attack, Confusion, isn't doing very much. Following him, I have to take on Sandy, and Moltres is exposed to a small amount of risk here because Peck is not able to one-hit her birds without a critical hit. On the SSN, I fight the Sailor so that I can grab the TM for rest, and then I go up against the rival again. This fight is rarely a challenge, so today let's just check in with Moltres' speed. It's 54. Upon defeating his Eevee, I gain enough experience to get to level 23, and I have 56 speed now. One shy of the outspeed on the Starmie. That said, a speed tie is much better than an underspeed. I didn't want to waste time training now, after all Moltres is already falling behind. So with the ship departed, I head back to Diglett's Tunnel and dig to Cerulean City. Okay, I'm probably rushing here, but let's see how my fight against Misty went. Staryu is first. I didn't want to waste time here, so I just knock it out using Peck twice. Water Gun really didn't do that much. Next is Starmie, and now I think it is time to use Fire Spin. I'm just hoping for the outspeeds here. First turn I get it, and then on the second turn Misty uses an X-Defend, so once again I get to do damage for free. But on the third turn, this all reverses because the Starmie moves first, hitting Bubble Beam, taking Moltres down to half health. Fire Spin hits, taking it to a similar amount. I outspeed, but miss on the next turn, and Bubble Beam once again connects, this time getting a speed drop. Now Starmie is faster, it moves first with Bubble Beam, and Moltres faints. I think I should have trained to 24, that would have been far more consistent. But instead, I come back and try again. This time against the Starmie, to minimize the misses, I go for Peck, dealing decent damage. By the time I get it to low health, I switch to using Fire Spin, which is probably not a good choice. However, Misty used an X-Defend, so that's perfect, and Fire Spin is able to trap it, and Moltres takes the win. It gets a second split of 16 minutes and 47 seconds. The data is all lining up with my prediction. Articuno is in first, Zapdos in second, and Moltres in third. Oh, that's nice, their ranks are the numbers they're based on. Outside of Cerulean City, I have to face the Wrapping Lass. Luckily with Moltres, Peck is doing enough damage to knock out both the Oddish and the Bellsprout in one hit. Inside Rock Tunnel, I have to go up against a Cubone. This Pokemon is very annoying because it has high defense. That said, it can't hit me with any powerful moves, so I'm not worried about it. The Slowpoke is also slow to knock out, but it can only damage me with Confusion. It doesn't have any water-type moves. And that brings us all the way to the self-destructing Hiker. For this battle, I'm going to teach Moltres Rest because I need a way to counter self-destruct. And that is not the only problem with this battle because his 3 rock types do know Rock Throw. There are just so many ways this fight can go wrong, I really have to hope for good Fire Spin luck. And I get it right away because it crits, taking the Geodude down to orange health, and then my next one hits, knocking it out. Okay, that's a really good start. Fire Spin continues to connect, taking the second Geodude down, so I've made it to his ace Graveler. The Fire Chicken continues to come through, getting a critical hit early on. It lasts for 3 hits, but then I miss, and Graveler uses self-destruct. By the way, this slow rock type gets a critical hit, dealing massive damage to Moltres, but the legendary hangs on, so I have cleared the most intimidating trainer in Rock Tunnel. Well, I don't have any healing items left over, and I still have to defeat 1 mandatory trainer. When my software records splits for her, it's always labeled as the finishing junior trainer, and that's specifically because when I was a kid, she would always polish me off when my Pokemon were bruised from the rest of the tunnel. That's exactly the scenario Moltres is facing her in. I have 24 health, Peck doesn't one-hit the Meowth, and it uses Growl, lowering my attack. Okay, please knock out the Oddish in 1 hit, and I don't. I was so worried it was going to use Sleep Powder or Stun Spore, but it just goes for Absorb, and I finish it on the next turn. but there still is a Pidgey left over. It survives with half health and uses Sand Attack. Then it starts dealing damage with Quick Attack. My Peck misses, not once, but twice. I get hit by Gust to 11 hit points and Quick Attack down to 5. Okay, this Peck has to come through for me, and it does. Okay, so Moltres has made it through the tunnel and into Lavender Town. I really dislike healing here because I want to set my waypoint to Celadon City, so I have to heal there anyways. But with Moltres this beat up, I think I need to. With my terrible legendaries health restored, I go south of the town, talk to this girl in the guardhouse, and get myself the TM for Swift. Finally a decently reliable move that Moltres can spam. In Celadon City, I start by grabbing PP ups. These are going to be very important for this run. Exploring the Rocket Hideout gives me access to a second one, and I'm also going to pick up all of the high-priced items. This is also going to be important later on. The biggest reward for this location, of course, is the rare candy. In the department store, I sell a bunch of items, and I'm just going to keep all of this money and not buy any vitamins with Moltres today. Additionally, I traded in all of the beverages so that I could sell those TMs for even more money. Outside of the city, I pick up the HM for Fly, and then I teach it to Moltres right away in the place of Peck. Of course, I can't use it outside of battle yet because I don't have Surge's badge. I didn't want to chance Fire Spin against him, and I thought using Swift would be far more reliable. So after backtracking through the middle of the map, let's take on what is usually the most underwhelming gym leader in all of Kanto. He's only got one Pokemon, it's Raichu, but it does know Thunderbolt. Moltres uses Swift, which does about a third, and the electric type does choose its best move, and it does half. If it uses it again, Moltres is going to lose. However, it goes for Mega Kick and misses, and that was exactly what Moltres needed. I filmed these first playthroughs with the birds in August, and as a result, my mid-game training is not really optimized here. However, this does give me a chance to mention something which I think is very funny. In Erica's gym, you have to be very careful with Moltres if you want to train, because Fire Spin and Fly can both miss, and you're probably not going to be using Swift. In the case that Moltres misses, gets paralyzed, and the opponent's Pokemon only has Wrap as a damage-dealing move, they will just spam this move over and over again and have a chance to knock you out. There are 4 trainers where this can happen, but only 3 of them are fought by Moltres in this run. Of them, I want to draw special attention to the cool trainer in the center, just because I regularly do face her because she has extremely good experience yields. So when I'm doing follow-up playthroughs, there will be a little bit of risk here. With that out of the way, let's take on Erica. I don't expect Moltres to have any problems here just because of its typing. Erica's Tangela is only going to use Constrict and Bind, and the Weepinbell and Gloom are both going to be stuck with Acid. That is if they ever get to attack, because as long as Fly is hitting, I am going to be getting 1-hits. The Weepinbell goes down, Gloom comes in, I use Fly, it doesn't miss, and with that, Moltres has earned itself its 4th badge. It did this in a time of 27 minutes and 41 seconds. Now, I definitely would understand if you thought this is a decent result for the fire type, but when compared with Articuno, it is night and day. Right after defeating Misty, I earned the TM for Bubble Beam, which I teach right away. Then outside of Cerulean City, while I fight the Rocket, I try to cheat by opening my inventory. Every time I do this, my heart almost stops. It has happened in the past where I've used a potion and had to start the run all over again. Of course, Sandy is not a problem. I have Ice Beam for her flying types. That leads Articuno to the SS Anne. Here, to be safe, I am going to pick up the TM for Rest. I get a lucky freeze against the Sailor's Tentacool, speeding the fight up just a little bit. After all, it can delay me using the move Wrap. The other item that I want to pick up is the rare candy, and it's walled off by this gentleman and his 2 fire types. But with Bubble Beam, Articuno has super effective damage against both of these Pokemon. I'm going to let the whole battle against the rival play out because I want you to see how dominant this legendary is. I'm not significantly overleveled, and access to Ice Beam early on means I am going to one-hit everything. Even in the case that I need to use Bubble Beam, it's still super effective against the Sandshrew, and I'm sure it would have knocked out his other Pokemon. Now, while Articuno has been smashing its way through this section of the game, up next is Surge, and technically it is weak to him, and it's also 5 levels under his Raichu. In this case, I just want to avoid critical hits and Thunderbolts. Raichu moves first, hitting Mega Punch. It does about a 5th, and Ice Beam does half. But then the electric type uses its same type move. Articuno hangs on with 6 hit points. Because of the damage I did last turn, I figured I was about to win, but no, the mouse survives with a sliver of health, chooses Thunderbolt again, and Articuno has its first reset. Okay, legendary Pokemon losing to Surge. That feels really bad. Of course, I'm just going to try this again because eventually Surge is going to drop the ball. Ice Beam does the same amount on turn 1 and Raichu goes for Thunderbolt. Are you kidding me? Luckily, it doesn't get a critical hit or inflict paralysis, so Articuno gets another chance to attack and this Ice Beam crits. I'm hoping that is the last reset to an embarrassingly bad trainer in this video. Because I really value being thorough in these videos, the next trainer is the Wrapping Lass, and obviously Articuno has no problems here. So much so that I was confident going into the battle without healing. The Ice type continues its dominant performance in Rock Tunnel, one-shotting Slowbone's Cubone, and then things slow down a little bit against the Slowpoke. I tried Peck, but it's doing so little, Ice Beam is actually the better go-to here. Unfortunately, Slowpoke disables it. That means I have to go back to the weaker flying move, but luckily Articuno gets a critical hit so the Slowpoke doesn't survive. Next is the first mandatory battle with Pokemon that have Rock-type moves. I think there might be the possibility to get a reset here if you Gen 1 miss attacking any of his Pokemon, but barring that, Articuno is going to be solid. Solid ice, that is, because it's definitely not going to get smashed by these rocks. In the game corner, I grab the rare candy, this is important for slow growth rate Pokemon, and then I teach Articuno Fly in the place of Peck. Because of its typing, it's not going to have any problems against grass-type Pokemon, so I'm going to go into the Celadon gym next. I felt getting to Erica as fast as possible was the priority, so I fight only the trainer with Execute, and then I'm ready. Okay, so let's see if Erica's grass types are all one-shots. I think they are going to be. Ice Beam crits the Tangela. Okay, that's good. Weeping Bell's next. Ice Beam knocks it out. And the Gloom is exactly the same. Okay, so remember Moltres' 27-minute and 41-second Erica split? Yeah, Articuno crushes it with a time of 19 minutes and 53 seconds. And that is even with the one unfortunate reset against Surge. So will the rankings remain unchanged and Zapdos get a time between these two? I think so. South of Cerulean City, I take on Sandy. Her team is very easy because I have Thundershock. On the SSN, defeating the Sailor to obtain Rest is simple, once again because of Electric-type attacks. Drill Peck is Zapdos' big advantage over the other two legendaries, and it really comes through against a bunch of other Pokemon, specifically the Gentleman's entire team, and then against the rival. I was fairly sure his Sandshrew was going to survive a single hit, but nope, Zapdos just gets a critical hit. This thing is on an absolute tear. When compared with the other two legendaries, it is the only one that takes neutral damage from Surge's Raichu. That said, it just barely doesn't have enough speed to move first, which I find infinitely frustrating. Also, the Raichu crits right away with Mega Punch, and that's not good because I was playing passively, cutting its speed with Thunder Wave. I thought this was the correct choice because both Drill Peck and Thundershock are resisted. With half damage, Drill Peck is only doing about a quarter. Zapdos gets hit by a second Mega Punch, taking it to orange health, and I'm not sure I will survive a third. Luckily for me, its high base speed comes through, giving Zapdos a critical hit, which takes Raichu to orange. That said, Surge's AI is playing very well. It goes for another Mega Punch, and Zapdos hangs on with 6 health, so that's it, it's won. I really narrowly dodged a second reset to Surge. The prize for defeating him is the TM for Thunderbolt, which of course I'm going to teach to Zapdos now. The unfortunate thing is electric moves don't really help throughout much of the mid-game in Pokemon Yellow. You can see that here as I face the Wrapping Lass. Of course Thunderbolt isn't useful here. It's very good that Zapdos has Drill Peck. Once I'm inside the tunnel, the same thing is true against the Pokemaniac with his Cubone, but luckily I can use Thunderbolt against his Slowpoke for an easy one-hit. It's really nice when that thing isn't a chore to knock out. Okay, now I'm sure some of you are thinking ahead and have realized that the self-destructing Hiker has the potential to be absolutely awful. His entire team has super effective damage with Rock Throw, and my electric moves cannot damage them. Because Generation 1 is very janky, I sometimes get asked if Thunder Wave can paralyze ground types, and it can't unfortunately. So the only move Zapdos currently has against his entire team is Drill Peck. And that is just not good enough for me. The solution is fairly simple. I'm just going to teach Zapdos Rest in the place of Thundershock. In this case, whenever one of his rock types self-destructs, I can just heal and then continue with the fight. Also, it is worth noting that Drill Peck is doing decent damage, and I knock out the first Geodude in only 3 hits. Plus, its Rock Throw really didn't do very much. This fight would be significantly harder if I had Articuno's typing and Zapdos' moveset, but of course that wouldn't make any sense. I make it to his final Graveler, and I don't want to deplete my Drill Pecks because they'll be useful against the next trainer in the tunnel. So instead I use Rest, Graveler blows itself up, and with that, Zapdos has made it through the tunnel. In the hideout, I pick up the rare candy, and then I buy 2 calciums for Zapdos in the department store. Following that, I obtain the HM for Fly, and as I go up against the rival in Pokemon Tower, I want to talk about the damage-dealing flying moves in Generation 1. If you didn't already know, these moves are kinda strange, so let's go through them. First of all, there are the moves that sound like they should be the flying type, but they aren't. That's Razor Wind and Whirlwind. These ones are still normal, by the way, so Game Freak never changed them. On the other hand, a move like Gust is normal in Generation 1, but was made flying in Generation 2. The first damage-dealing move that most flying Pokemon get is Peck, which has base power of 35. This is really strange because Wing Attack also has 35 base power. This comparison is increasingly perplexing because they both have the same PP and no secondary effects. So these two moves are identical. I think this context clearly explains why the developers upped Wing Attack's base power to be 60 in Generation 2. There is one flying type status move, which is Mirror Move, and then there are 3 other flying type attacks that deal damage. Fly, which has a base power of 70 and an accuracy of 95, Drill Peck with base power 80 and accuracy 100, and Sky Attack with 140 base power and 90% accuracy. These 3 moves are really strange when considered together. Fly has the downside of taking 2 turns and a chance to miss, but Drill Peck just has the better base power. To me, it would seem more balanced if Drill Peck had base 70 power and Fly had base 80 power. And it seems the developers agreed with me, at least later on, because in Generation 4, Fly's base power was increased from 70 to 90. Now, I have received some comments in the past telling me that I should use Sky Attack because it has an increased critical hit chance. And in Generation 1, it does not have a secondary effect, outside of the fact that it takes a turn to charge. And this is not an invulnerable turn to charge like Fly. This is just a turn where your Pokemon can be attacked. So let's say I use Fly 2 times in a row and my Pokemon is moving first. If that's the scenario I'm in, Fly will deal 140 base power of damage to the opponent, and I will take 1 turn of damage provided I knock the enemy out. With Sky Attack, it is the exact same scenario. I guess it's nice that the damage takes place over fewer turns, but that's not really a major advantage when the move only has 5 PP. Plus, over the same number of turns, Drill Peck would inflict more damage. But for the 2 Pokemon that are going to be using Fly in these playthroughs, Articuno and Moltres, it's also not an option to use Sky Attack because there is no move deleter, so I can't even remove Fly later into the playthrough when I want to switch to Sky Attack. Plus, Fly has the chance to knock the opponent out in a single hit without taking damage, whereas Sky Attack always leaves you vulnerable for 1 turn. I hope I have explained that clearly and everyone understands why Sky Attack is not a good option. I thought that would be a little bit quicker, so we've been watching a lot of B-roll right now from Zapdos. Let's get back into the playthrough and I'll try to be a little bit more concise. On Cycling Road, I fight no optional trainers, and then after the Safari Zone, I go to Erica's gym. Like Articuno, I fight only the Execute trainer and then the gym leader herself. I was expecting Drill Peck to just sweep her team, but the Tangela survives and uses Constrict. No speed drop though, so I knock it out, move on to the Weepinbell, and this time Zapdos gets the 1 hit. It continues against the Gloom, and so the Electric type gets a 4th split of 24 minutes and 39 seconds. Here are the splits from the first 4 gym leaders. The rankings have not changed. That said, I think Articuno's time is a little bit artificially low because it didn't do Pokemon Tower or the Safari Zone yet, and Zapdos did. In the next section of Pokemon Yellow, I don't like to compare splits because the paths can be wildly different. The next split that we'll compare is against Giovanni, and I am very worried about Zapdos' chances against him. But before then, there's a lot to do, so let's go to Sylph. Of course, I'm going to fight the guy with the Machoke to get the rare candy, but I accidentally run into a guy with 2 Cubones. After that, I fight 2 more trainers, and then I figured it was time for Zapdos to use rare candies. 6 take me up from level 32 to 38, and then I face the rival. I know that Drill Peck is going to take a while to knock the Sandslash out. I'm just hoping it doesn't go for Sand Attack, and of course it does on the very first turn. Hopefully it doesn't poison me. Luckily it doesn't, but it does slash, doing a decent amount of damage, and then I miss. It goes for Sand Attack, luckily it misses this time, and then I finish it off. Obviously the Cloyster is a one-shot with Thunderbolt, and then against Magneton I don't really have a good option. That said, it isn't going to use electric type attacks against me because I'm an electric type. I can take my time with Rest and then slowly knock it out using Drill Peck. Unless accuracy is my downfall because I run out of Drill Peck PP on the Magneton and have to finish it with Thunderbolt. Luckily it was at low red health, so it only takes 1. I miss first turn against the Kadabra, it uses Psybeam, but it doesn't do that much even when it gets a critical hit. Once Zapdos wakes up, I can use Thunderbolt to knock out the Psychic type, and the following Flareon goes down in only 2 hits with only 1 miss against it. That battle was honestly quite slow, and so is the one against Giovanni because Zapdos' only option against the Rhyhorn is using Drill Peck. If you think this is a bad omen for what's coming in the final battle against Giovanni, don't worry, there are other options available there. With Giovanni's Nidoqueen out of the way, I can move on with my playthrough, in this case going to Fuchsia City, because I think Koga is going to be quite easy for Zapdos. Drill Peck is going to one-hit all the Venonats, right? Well, let's see. The first one goes down to a single critical hit. Okay, that's not a great test. The second one falls to a regular hit, and so does the third one. Alright, that's perfect. My electric type outspeeds the Venomoth, but it survives on a sliver of health. Luckily, the ground type doesn't get a chance to attack because Koga uses an X attack. By the way, if you're a new viewer, welcome to the channel. I'm sure you're writing a comment right about now. With Koga finished, I now have access to Surf outside of battle, and I'm going to head south of Pallet Town. Just a visual warning, we're going to go into Cinnabar Mansion, and the tiles here are very jarring to look at. I'm showing this footage for a purpose in this video though, and that's because Zapdos is only level 41. By the time I reach the basement floor, I can now run into encounters, specifically against level 41 Muck, level 43 Raticate, and 46 Raticate. Whenever a wild Pokemon shows up, it is a frustrating small delay for the Pokemon that I'm running. There's no way to prevent this because repels only block Pokemon under your lead's current level. In my follow-up playthroughs, I turn off encounters to normalize RNG in certain locations, but I won't be doing that here or in the Safari Zone because these wild encounters are related to the Pokemon that I'm using. With the mansion done and dusted, I think Zapdos should face Blaine next. This fight often causes problems, even with Pokemon that shouldn't have an issue with him. That said, things go very well for Zapdos against the Ninetales. It doesn't get burned, doesn't have its defense lowered, and it doesn't get confused. Rapidash is by far Blaine's weakest Pokemon. Zapdos gets a critical hit with Thunderbolt, it survives on a sliver, and Blaine uses his signature Super Potion. Honestly, I don't see these very much in Pokemon Yellow, so it's kind of refreshing. I knock the Flaming Horse out on the next turn and move on to his ace, Arcanine. I was a bit worried after Thunderbolt does less than half, also Takedown is doing quite a bit. That said, Zapdos' next hit crits and Arcanine faints, so Blaine's done. That was actually very easy. I dig out of the Cinnabar Gym and head back to Saffron City. My next stop is going to be Copycat's house because I want to pick up the TM for Mimic. I think this is going to be critical for Zapdos' success. Before going to the Saffron Gym, I stop by the Fighting Dojo because I want to take on all of the trainers here to gain levels. This is so that I can boost Zapdos' speed and hopefully be faster than Sabrina's Alakazam. When the legendary levels up to 44, it has exactly 135 speed, which is 2 more than her Alakazam. So this fight should be really straightforward. I do expect her final Psychic-type Pokemon to survive. In this case it does. It uses Recover, then she uses an X-Defend, and Drill Peck knocks it out. Zapdos now has 7 badges, and I need to prepare for Giovanni. To do this, I fly back to Celadon City to pick up a TM for Reflect. You'll notice that I'm buying more than one. The reason is I thought I might have to unlearn the move and then teach it again later. It's not really relevant for this playthrough, I was just trying to be safe. In that spirit, I go to the 5th floor and buy more vitamins. Okay, so it's time to head into the Viridian City Gym. I'm gonna save before the first trainer. After all, he has a Rhyhorn. Drillpeck doesn't take that long to knock it out, and then I move on to the next trainer who has 3 fighting types. As I'm defeating them, Zapdos levels up to 45, and now I think it's time to face Giovanni. Well, at least for Zapdos, the other 2 need to catch up, so let's check in with Moltres. Yes, I am just going to leave you hanging there. It's called dramatic tension. In comparison to Zapdos, Moltres feels incredibly slow. For instance, against the rival in Pokemon Tower's Shelder, it is spamming Withdraw, and I'm using Fly to knock it out, which takes quite a while. I decide to not give it more turns to set up and use Swift instead, but it hangs on, taking 1 more turn to finish. Moltres really isn't that good. I do want to mention that I think the developers thought that Fire Spin was the best Fire-type move other than Fire Blast. My supporting evidence here is the fact that Moltres starts with it, and it's Charizard's last level up move. And yes, trapping moves are very good, but they're also very slow, so in speedruns, they're really not what you want to be doing. Either way, Moltres has good stats, and it's eventually able to get the job done. With Fly, it doesn't have any problems against any of the Chandler in Pokemon Tower. And now let's talk about items. I'm going to pick up the HP up, not so I have more health. I want to sell this. I'm also going to grab a Nugget, and then in the Safari Zone, I'm going to continue picking up high-priced items. Once I'm finished with this area, I'm going to sell a bunch of these, and I'm watching my money specifically because I'm looking for 110,000 Pokédollars. After selling everything, I top out just over 90,000, so I'm going to need to pick up some more items. Luckily for me, there are a bunch in Sylph. A Carbos, the Earthquake TM, Calcium, Protein, and the Takedown TM. Selling all of these gives me the money I need, so I head back to Celadon City and pick up the coin case. Now, is everyone ready for things to really slow down? Yeah, I have to buy coins in the game corner 50 at a time. It seems like in Generation 1, the developers thought you would only need to buy a few coins from this guy, and then eventually you would just gamble and earn enough to buy the prizes, but really that is not realistic. I remember as a kid spamming this dialogue so much trying to buy a Porygon. It took forever, and even on 4 times game speed in these challenges, it still takes a long time. The reason I'm doing this is because I want 5,500 coins, and with them, I can purchase myself the TM for Hyper Beam. After all, in Generation 1, this move is broken because if you knock the opponent's Pokemon out, you don't have to recharge. With Moltres' limited Learn set going into this first playthrough, I thought this powerful normal type move was its best option for success. I think it's important to get an accurate sense for how much time it's going to cost me in order to get this move. So here's the breakdown of everything that was required in order to do this. Number 1, I had to pick up a bunch of high-priced items that I didn't need to pick up. Number 2, I had to sell these items so that my bag doesn't fill up. After all, in Generation 1, you only have 20 inventory spots for all different kinds of items. Number 3, the time spent picking up the coin case. Number 4, the time spent purchasing all the coins. Number 5, the time spent moving between all of these overworld locations. And number 6, the time spent purchasing the TM and teaching it to Moltres. I went through the run and cut out every segment that is one of these categories. I did it as frame perfectly as possible, and so here is a summary of my time investment. I do want to note that I didn't include things that I would have regularly done in a playthrough, so like selling items in the department store the first time I arrived there. That was going to happen anyways, it doesn't really count towards this time. By the way, while editing this video, I realized there are 2 more categories, both of which are symptoms of the fact that your inventory is just so full. So number 1, you will have to spend time dropping items, and number 2, you will have to spend time depositing key items in the PC to free up more space. The total time required to do all of these things and get Hyper Beam in this run was 5 minutes, 42 seconds, and 53 frames. So let's see if this major investment pays off. Before continuing, I fight some trainers in Sylph to level Moltres up to 36 before I take on the rival. Sandslash is first, I go for Fly, and it does uninspiring damage. I try Hyper Beam, but it just misses, and then when I do use it, it doesn't get close to knocking out, so I have to recharge. And yeah, I take a lot of damage before I even move on to the Cloyster. At this moment, I couldn't decide between Rest and Fire Spin, because Fire Spin is going to stack up the poison damage really quickly. I didn't get to do much damage. I try for Hyper Beam, maybe I would get a crit, but I don't, and Aurora Beam finishes Moltres off. Okay, I think I should use rare candies. This might make the late game more difficult, but I need a solution for the rival now. With 4, I am level 40, and now I can 2-hit the Sandslash using Fly into Hyper Beam. Against the Cloyster, I can Fire Spin it down to lowish health, and then polish it off using Fly. Well, that is, if I don't just miss and take an Aurora Beam. Luckily, eventually I hit and it does go down. Next is Magneton. I'm going to repeat the Fire Spin strategy here, but it just keeps missing twice before it finally hits and I take out the Electric type. The final 2 Pokemon are going to be a lot easier. Hyper Beam 1 hits the Kadabra, and it also does on the Flareon. I wasn't expecting that. The rival was fairly challenging, but Giovanni, who follows, is really not going to be. Although it's fairly slow, like with Zapdos, because I have to use Fire Spin to knock out the Rhyhorn. Koga's next, and this one should be fairly straightforward. I think Fly is going to one-hit all the Venonats, and it does. Next is Venomoth. Of course, like Zapdos, my Flying type move just barely doesn't do enough damage, but it doesn't end up mattering. This win is very exciting because now with Surf, I can go to Cinnabar Island and face Blaine. Once I defeat him, I will get the TM for Fire Blast, which is a 120 base power move with 85% accuracy and a 30% chance to burn. At long last, Moltres will have direct fire type damage that isn't Fire Spin. That is, if I can actually beat Blaine, I have to use Rest on the Rapidash, and then it uses Takedown, followed by Stomp, which crits. I wake up and I'm back at low health, but I can't move on this turn. Rapidash goes for another critical hit Stomp and Moltres faints. We were so close, but still, Fire Blast seems so far away. Hopefully in this attempt I can beat him. One advantage Moltres has is that it's outspeeding all of his Pokemon, so I can actually trap them in Fire Spin, doing chip damage. I do this for a little bit against the Arcanine, just so it doesn't damage me with moves like Takedown. And as you can see, when it hits, it does so much. But because of the recoil damage, I felt comfortable using Hyper Beam, and it gets the knockout. Moltres, at long last, has earned TM 38, and so I teach it Fire Blast in the place of Fire Spin. As I face Sabrina, let's talk about the implications of giving up the trapping move. The pros are quite simple. I won't have to take as long during battle, and I'm not going to have to contend with awful accuracy. Plus, I can now potentially burn critical targets. I'm thinking Giovanni's Rhydon. That will really minimize damage from Rock Slide. And maybe, just maybe, Moltres could survive a hit then. There's only one con, which is I can no longer trap Pokemon that I outspeed indefinitely. That could be a problem against Lance's Gyarados. After all, it is going to be spamming Hydro Pump. Okay, so we've made it to Sabrina's Alakazam. It goes for Reflect, and so Hyper Beam is not doing very much. I decide to use Fire Blast instead. After all, it's going to do a lot of damage, especially when it crits, but Alakazam just barely hangs on. It goes for Psychic, getting a massive crit itself, and this lowers Moltres' special. Okay, Fire Blast, now is not the time to miss, and of course it does. If the Alakazam uses Psychic, I'm pretty sure I lose. I'll probably survive a Psywave after all, it'll do like 1 damage. That said, Moltres is now faster because of the special drop, and Fire Blast hits, knocking the Alakazam out. Because I'm pretty terrified of Giovanni's Rhydon, I'm going to do some additional training in the Fighting Dojo. Really, I should have done this much earlier into the playthrough so that I could have benefited from these levels. This training brings Moltres up to level 46, and then I explore the power plant to grab 1 more rare candy. Also, this location is useful because near Zapdos, you can actually pick up another PP up, and this is going to give me more uses of Fire Blast, so I take the time to grab it. In the Viridian City Gym, I fight trainers, leveling Moltres up to 47, and now I think it's time for more rare candies. I use my remaining 7 to bring Moltres up to level 54. Will this be enough for the Ground-type specialist with a Rock-type ace? Well, let's find out in a bit, because we first have to see Articuno. Yes, I did it to you again. I'm not sorry. Don't worry, this thing is going to absolutely crush the mid-game. At least that's my expectation. And things start off that way in Pokemon Tower. The rival is easy, as well as Agatha Jr. On Cycling Road, I don't fight any trainers, only grabbing the rare candy, and then I head into the Safari Zone. Note here, I am skipping the Carbos because I don't think that Articuno needs it. Next is Sylph. I make one of the worst pathing mistakes. It looks like I intentionally ran around this trainer and decided to fight him. No, that was just an input error. By the way, just in case you're curious, when you're watching the footage, it is usually half of the speed that it was when I was playing the game. Hopefully that puts this error into a little bit of context. For Articuno, I don't think that it needs much optional training in Sylph, so at level 31, I decide to use Rare Candies. And because of its typing, I figured that it was safe to use a total of 7, bringing it up to level 38 before battling the rival. It should go without saying that the Sandslash is an easy one-hit. That said, I don't really have a good move to take on the following Cloyster. The fact that the only type Ice resists is itself is actually an advantage here because then Aurora Beam won't be super effective. In order to knock the Water Ice type out, I'm going to have to use a combination of Fly and Bubble Beam. The former move ends up being not very good because the Cloyster loves Withdraw, so Bubble Beam has to get the job done. By the time Articuno takes the Cloyster out, it only has orange health remaining, which is quite bad because next is Magneton. I was praying for a freeze here. Unfortunately, Ice Beam doesn't get it, but I survive Magneton's Thunder Shock and knock it out. Okay, maybe there's a chance. After all, I am 5 speed faster than the Kadabra. In retrospect, I make what is a mistake here, choosing Ice Beam against the Kadabra. I'm pretty sure Fly would have one-hit. I checked my root file for this playthrough, and yes, Fly was a guaranteed one-hit, provided it doesn't miss. Articuno does survive Kadabra's follow-up Confusion, and while I do take it out, I can't one-hit the Flareon with anything. I went for Ice Beam here because yes, it does have the highest effective power. Remember, in Gen 1, fire types do not resist ice type moves. In this case, my legendary gets a critical hit at the moment when it really matters. But the Flareon survives on a sliver of health and knocks me out with Ember. Let's try that again. I think Articuno can get this done. Against the Cloyster, I can go for Bubble Beam right away, so every time it uses Withdraw, it's essentially just wasting a turn. Still, Clamp does a lot of damage, and I end up at around the same amount of health going into the Magneton. This time though, the Electric type crits with Thunder Shock, and Articuno once again faints. Alright, so I'm just barely not doing it. Let's go to Koga instead. He should be fairly simple. After all, Fly is super effective against 3 of his Pokemon, which are bug types. I just barely don't get the knockout on the 3rd Venonat. It poisons me, and then he sends in Venomoth. Okay, I think Ice Beam is probably going to be better here. Going for Fly gives it time to set up Double Team. That said, the Ice move only does what looks like a 3rd, and Venomoth uses Psychic, taking me down to half health. I continue with Ice Beam, taking it to orange health. It sets up Double Team, but I don't miss, and with that, Koga is defeated. Fighting him first gives me 2 more levels to face the rival with. This will be a little bit better damage ranges. Also, I have noticed that Ice Beam is just fine against the Cloyster. While I can't freeze, it is doing more damage than Bubble Beam. Also, this time the rival is completely incompetent. Clamp misses, he goes for Withdraw, and then Articuno crits, so I move on to the Magneton with full health. Ice Beam takes it to orange health, it uses Thunder Shock, only doing about a quarter, and I knock it out. For the Kadabra, I just continue my Ice Beam spam, finishing it over 2 turns. Flareon comes out, I do more than half. Ember takes Articuno to orange, but it doesn't matter. Staying in Saffron City, I pick up the TM for Mimic. Then in the Fighting Dojo, I get Articuno some quick experience, and after that, I head into the Saffron City gym to face Sabrina. I only outspeed one of her Pokemon, the Abra. I can knock it out with just a single Ice Beam. Next is Kadabra, it moves first, hitting Kinesis. Also, it survives my 2nd Ice Beam with a sliver of health. My PP is really precious. I only have 2 more uses of Ice Beam, so I go for Water Gun, but it misses, giving Kadabra another turn. And with it, the Psychic type goes for its most powerful move, Psychic. To make things even worse for me, it gets a critical hit, and Articuno survives with orange health. While I am able to finish off Sabrina's 2nd Pokemon, I am not doing very much to the Alakazam, and both of my Ice Beams do not get freezes. So I guess I have to hope for a critical hit with Fly, but I don't get it, and the Alakazam eventually finishes Articuno off. This thing was completely dominant in the early game, and only now in the later stages of the mid-game is it running into bumpy territory. In the next fight, I get some great freeze luck, which is always something that Articuno has on its side as sort of a passive buff. I inflict the status condition on both the Abra as well as the Kadabra, and I make it to the Alakazam with full health. It just goes for a turn 1 recover, which is absolutely awful. Ice Beam does a little bit under half, and then it crits with Psychic. But once again, Articuno hangs on, uses Ice Beam, taking it down to low health. Alright, I just need to get one more in, unless Alakazam uses Recover. That's really frustrating. Okay, I guess it's just another chance for me to roll for a crit or for a freeze, or in this case, for Alakazam to use Reflect, which does nothing, and my next Ice Beam polishes it off. The next gym leader that I have to face, of course, is Blaine. There's no choice about this now. So Articuno is level 44, going up against his team of Pokemon that are level 48 to 54. Generation 1 is my saving grace because I can use Ice Beam against all of them, and I crit the Ninetales, knocking it out in one turn. Alright, that was impressive. I go for Ice Beam on the Rapidash, it does half, and then the horse crits me with Stomp. But I knock it out on the next turn and move on to Blaine's Arcanine. Ice Beam does just under half, but it takes a page out of Sabrina's book and uses Reflect, giving me another turn of damage, taking it down to red. It gets a critical hit with Takedown, but Articuno survives, giving me one last turn, and with that, Blaine is defeated on my first attempt. And at long last, we have finally made it to that portion of the game. I'm in the Viridian City Gym now, facing one optional trainer, which brings Articuno up to level 46. And with that out of the way, let's finally take on Giovanni. Of the three birds, Articuno definitely stacks up the best against him. Oh, but the Dugtrio moves first and uses Sand Attack. That is not how I want this fight to be starting. The Rhydon knows Rock Slide, and this move will deal 4 times damage. Articuno just can't afford to miss against it. I knock out the Persian and make it to the Nidoqueen with full health. So far, so good. I go for Ice Beam, it misses, and the Nido uses Thunder, which does so much due to a crit, and it also paralyzes Articuno. So that is a reset, and I didn't expect that the Ice type would have one here. Even if the Dugtrio doesn't go for Sand Attack, the fight can still be problematic for Articuno. The moles can't do any damage, but the Persian can. Slash is devastating, doing almost half. Plus, I need 2 turns to knock it out, giving it time to set up Double Team. In this case, that doesn't result in more damage, which is perfect. Without my accuracy dropped, I can one-hit both the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking, making it to his ace, Rhydon. I think the only way I lose here is if I get a Gen 1 miss. In this case, I go for Bubble Beam, and it doesn't miss, as expected, and the Rhydon faints. Articuno gets a final gym split of 36 minutes and 42 seconds. And now I expect things are gonna get much more difficult. How is Zapdos going to do against the Ground-type specialist? On the Dugtrio, I want to take the honorable path to victory and mimic Earthquake for super effective damage against Giovanni's final 3 Pokemon. Of course, the dishonorable option is mimicking Double Team from the Persian, setting this up, and then sweeping his team. I thought that Drill Peck was going to one-hit the Dugtrio, but it survives, uses Sand Attack, I miss, and then I knock it out on the next turn. At least I didn't get another one in. Next is Persian, which I crit with Thunderbolt, getting a one-shot. Okay, so I've made it to the Nidos. Let's see how much Earthquake does. And the answer is just a little bit more than half. However, Nidoqueen uses Tail Whip, and that's where I need to draw your attention to the fact that the AI is only ever going to use this move. When it checks the type interactions, it sees that Earthquake does nothing to my Flying type, that Thunder is resisted by the Electric type, and that Double Kick is resisted by the Flying type. So it finds that its only useful move is Tail Whip and spams this. That means that the Nidoking is going to do the exact same thing using Leer. The advantage is that I can knock out these 2 Pokemon for free, but the disadvantage is that my defense stat is getting lowered, and I'm about to level up, so I'm going to lose my badge boosts when the Nidoking goes down. Giovanni sends in Rhydon, and now Rock Slide is going to hit really hard. Plus, I miss an Earthquake, and that's 1 loss. Okay, this fight isn't as bad as I was expecting though. I can use Drill Peck on the Dugtrio, knock out the Persian with Thunderbolt, in this case it takes 2 turns, move on to the Nidoqueen, sweep it, and the Nidoking for free with Earthquake, and then see how much damage I can do to the Rhydon. And in this case, the answer is less than half. Once again with my defense lowered, this time to -1, it hits with Rock Slide and Zapdos faints. I have a little bit of experience towards level 46, so I'm going to fight some trainers in the gym to get this level, and then I'm going to use 4 rare candies to bring Zapdos up to level 50. I think this is all it's going to need. First turn, I mimic Earthquake, Dugtrio goes underground, which is a little bit annoying. It does nothing with Dig, just wasting my time, and then I knock it out with Drill Peck. Thunderbolt now, without a critical hit, can one-shot the Persian, and Earthquake is going to 2-hit both of the Nidos, but this time, the badge boosts I'm getting from them will be retained on the Rhydon. That means Earthquake does more damage, in this case because of a critical hit. Giovanni uses a Guard Spec, and Zapdos defeats him. After saying no to Thunder, which is a trash move in Generation 1, Zapdos clocks in with a 39-minute and 25-second Giovanni split. Moltres can use Hyper Beam against the Dugtrio and then Fire Blast on the Persian for 2 one-hits. Do note now that I have not taught Mimic specifically because I don't have a move to give up. I want Rest for the end of the game. Fire Blast and Hyper Beam are my go-to moves, and I can't unlearn Fly even if I wanted to. Moltres doesn't have the same advantage with typing that Zapdos had. Both of the Nidos are going to be spamming Thunder in this case. Luckily for me, Giovanni just uses a guard spec on the Nidoqueen, and I also burn it with my Fire Blast. This lets me use Fly to go into the air, the status condition finishes it off, and then I hit the Nidoking on the turn it comes into battle. Moltres has fantastic special, so it tanks Thunder quite well, and Hyper Beam does enough to knock the Nido out. But what about the Rhydon? In this case, I think I need a Miracle with Fire Blast. As soon as I thought that, it just misses, Rhydon uses Rock Slide, and that's that. In my second attempt, I make it by both of the Nidos with full health, which is fantastic. Then Fire Blast does more than half to the Rhydon. I thought that might be it, especially because it gets a burn, but Rhydon's Rock Slide does so much damage because Moltres got hit by Screech. Like Zapdos, I fight some trainers in the gym, and then I also backtrack to Cycling Road to get Moltres all the way to level 50 without using rare candies. The reason I did this is because I'm very afraid of Lance's Gyarados. In retrospect, watching this footage back and doing the narration, I think this is a lot of overkill. Moltres definitely doesn't need this high of a level. I'm going to use 7 rare candies, taking it up to level 57, and on its way at level 55, it has the chance to learn Agility. I haven't talked about this move yet, and it is the only badge boosting move that all 3 of the birds get. Well, other than the TM for Double Team, but that is banned due to my rules. I decided to pass up on this just because I think Moltres' current set is fantastic. With 2 more rare candies used and level 57, I attempt Giovanni again. I miss Fire Blast not once, but twice against the Nidoqueen. Luckily it sets up with Guard Spec, and then I crit on the next turn, buying back some time. Nidoking's next, and I go for Fire Blast, and yeah, this one crits too. Okay, this is really good. So, will I survive one of Rhydon's Rock Slides? Well, I don't actually need to find out because for a 3rd time in a row, Moltres gets a crit. Examining the root file while doing this narration, I found out that Rock Slide had a 51.71% chance to one-hit Moltres, and that is if it was at full health. It deals between 187 and 220 damage, so without that critical hit, Moltres would have lost. In this case, luck was on its side and it gets a Giovanni split of 58 minutes and 43 seconds. Here are the most recent splits as they stand right now. The ranking is unchanged. Articuno is still in 1st place, Zapdos in 2nd, and Moltres in 3rd. I would be very surprised if something happened during the league to change this ranking, so let's just keep going with the playthroughs. The next battle is the rival on Route 22. Articuno shouldn't have problems here. Ice Beam is super effective against his first 2 Pokemon. I have to take things slow on the Cloyster, knocking it out with 4 uses of Ice Beam. And then he has Magneton, which goes for Thunder Wave, paralyzing. Also, I'm confused and I hit myself. While I do knock it out, I am paralyzed with half health for the Kadabra. It goes for Psychic. Articuno does survive, but I shouldn't have been worried about it because Flareon is next and it uses Flamethrower, and that's that. It's worth noting that last battle went pretty well. The Cloyster can be awful with Clamp and Confusion, and this results in Articuno being bruised by the time the Magneton even comes in. Luckily this time it goes for Thundershock, so I don't get a status, meaning I can move first against the Kadabra and heal using Rest. Kadabra wastes time with Recover, but then it goes for Psychic, gets a crit and does more than half. Articuno wakes up, but Kadabra has another Psychic setup, so it takes me to red health. I continue using Rest, it switches into Psybeam, uses Reflect, and then does nothing with Recover, giving Articuno the time it needs to knock it out with 2 Ice Beams. This time I have enough health to tank the Flamethrower and knock the Flareon out with 2 hits. To prepare Articuno for the league, I journey into the power plant to collect an additional rare candy, and I also face trainers in Victory Road to bring it to level 50. Just outside of Lorelei's chamber, I use rare candies, leveling it up from 50 all the way to 55. At level 51, I have the chance to learn Blizzard, which I teach in the place of Bubble Beam, and this new moveset update is slightly undercut by the fact that when I reach level 55, I decide to teach Agility in that slot anyways. Now, Articuno is ready to go. With Zapdos, I do things in reverse order. I pick up the rare candy in the power plant, and then I face the rival on Route 22. With other electric types, I would be saying that the Sandslash isn't difficult now, but later when I get to the champion, it's going to know Earthquake, but that's irrelevant for Zapdos, and it feels really good. It's fairly slow to knock out using Drill Peck, but it doesn't do much, and then I can one-shot the following Execute and the Cloyster. Okay, time for the Magneton. Now I wasn't sure what its AI was going to do, but it appears it cannot use its electric moves, which is fantastic. As a result, I finish it off, off, I still have green health. Drill Peck 1 hits the Kadabra, and Flareon goes down to 2 uses of Thunderbolt. There's only one more pre-league rival battle, and it's with Moltres. Fire Blast is able to one-shot all 3 of his initial Pokemon, and I was wondering if maybe, just maybe, it would do the same to the Magneton. And it actually does without a critical hit. For Kadabra, I use Hyper Beam, securing a 1-hit, and the following Flareon also feints to this move when it finally hits. As was the case with all of the legendary birds, I grab the rare candy in Victory Road, and then I fight some optional trainers. The 2 cool trainers in the entrance area, as well as the Black Belt and the Juggler that are just through the next ladder. This brings Moltres up to level 60, and now I think it is time for us to take on the Elite Four. The first member of the league is Lorelei. For Moltres, this one is a mixed bag. I wasn't really sure if I should be terrified or confident. My experience playing with this thing as a kid tells me I should be terrified, but maybe, just maybe, the fire type won't struggle. Well, it misses its fly on the first turn, and then Dugong's Aurora Beam lowers its attack. I click too fast and use fly again, doing about a third, and tank a bubble beam as a result. Okay, so I should probably be using Fire Blast here. I knock her lead out, move on to the Cloyster, miss with Fire Blast, and take some damage from Ice Beam. Oh, that's actually a reset because it froze me. So we know that Fire Blast is the right choice, and in this case it almost knocks the Dugong out in a single turn. That causes Lorelei to use a Super Potion, so I use Fly to polish it off. Next is Cloyster. Fire Blast gets the 1 hit when it actually connects, and so I've made it to the Slowbro. I don't really have a good move here. I'm going to use Fly, doing a little bit more than a third. It sets up with Withdraw, and then I use Hyper Beam, critting and knocking it out. I continue with the powerful normal type move, knocking the Jinx out, and make it to the Lapras. Okay, so Fire Blast does more than half. It uses Blizzard, but Moltres confidently survives and aims its Fire Blast well. Okay, it's time for silly music and a silly choice. I accidentally use Hyper Beam on the Onix. Yeah, that's not a good choice. I use Fly after that to counter the Onix's dig, and eventually I use Fire Blast, the correct move, and knock it out. From there, Fly one-shots the Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Fire Blast obliterates the second Onix. I want to specifically note that one does no Rock Slide, but it's not a problem for Moltres in this run. While the Machamp does survive a single hit with red health, it just goes for submission and knocks itself out. A very fitting end to this fight. Against Agatha, Moltres has a lot of options. It can use Fly and Fire Blast for damage, and Hyper Beam against the Golbat and the Arbok. Interestingly, I don't one-hit the Golbat with Hyper Beam, allowing it to use Toxic on me, but I actually think this is an advantage. Now I can't be paralyzed or put to sleep. I make it through her Haunter as well as her Arbok and arrive at the final Gengar. And then Fire Blast misses once, twice, and I take so much damage from poison. I'm not actually sure if I'm going to survive the next one. This time Fire Blast hits, doing about 2/3 to the Gengar, and I do survive the poison damage with 5 hit points. Because Moltres is faster, I can use Rest to heal, removing the status condition. I survive the Gengar's uses of Psychic and use Fly to polish it off. That brings us to Lance. This is the battle I have been most terrified for with Moltres. It is the reason that I invested in Hyper Beam. His Gyarados is the stuff of nightmares for fire types. In this case, I can outspeed using Fly, and I get a critical hit bringing it down to red health, triggering Lance's Hyper Potion. By the way, when trainers use items in Generation 1, it replaces the move that they were going to use. I go for Fly again, doing half to the Gyarados. It hits Hydro Pump, which does so much because of a critical hit, but Moltres survives on 14 hit points. I figured I had knocked it out. However, I miss with Hyper Beam, but Gyarados also misses with its Hydro Pump. As a result, I'm able to finish it off and move on to his first Dragonair. I have so little health, I didn't know if I should use Rest here or not, but I decided to go for Hyper Beam and I one-shot the Dragonair. Okay, that's good. On the second one, I will use Rest to heal because it's going to spam Ice Beam or Bubble Beam, both moves that won't do that much to Moltres. Actually, they are doing more damage than I was anticipating, especially if the Dragonair gets a critical hit. This also allows him to lower my speed, so I'm no longer faster than the Aerodactyl, but I am faster than the Dragonite. I decide to go for it, knocking the Dragonair out with Hyper Beam, and now it's time for the Aerodactyl. It can't do that much damage, so I take some time healing with Rest, and once I'm back at green health, I start attacking. Aerodactyl takes me to orange health, and my Fire Blast does the same to it. Luckily it chooses Wing Attack and Moltres heals again. I might actually be able to do this. The interactions that follow are a little bit silly. Aerodactyl's using Hyper Beam and I'm using Fire Blast, but I am missing. In the end though, my legendary is superior to the prehistoric Pokemon, so I'm moving on to his Dragonite. Okay, Moltres, you can do this. Actually, should I use Hyper Beam or Fly? I was thinking that Hyper Beam would not get the one hit and then I would have to recharge. I decide to go for Fly. It does a little bit less than half. Dragonite uses Thunder, luckily missing, and because of that, my Hyper Beam knocks it out, and Moltres beats Lance on its first attempt. I was not expecting that to happen. For Articuno, its matchup against Lorelei is not very good. Every time the rival sends out his Cloyster, I've really emphasized the fact that I have to knock it out slowly, and that's essentially the situation I'm in here against 5 Pokemon. This is why I didn't pass up Agility when I had the chance to learn it. I can use it to badge boost against the Dugong. I'm really hoping that this is going to give Fly enough damage to 2 or 3 hit, and in this case, the more optimistic damage range is possible. But still, Lorelei has a Cloyster following that. In this case, it looks like it's choosing between Supersonic, Clamp, and Spike Cannon, all of which are not that good. Also, it has low special, so I'm able to 3-hit it using my own Ice Beams. Slowbro's next, I go for Fly, doing just under half. It's setting up Amnesia, which is very scary because when it uses Surf, it takes Articuno down to red health. I get one more attack in, knocking it out, and now there's only 2 Pokemon left. I figured healing on the Jinx made most sense. Its physical attacks are really not that impressive. After that, Fly 1 hits it, and now it's time for Lorelei's Ace. It looks like the Lapras is only using Body Slam and Confuse Ray. It probably should be using Hydro Pump. I'm just getting lucky and not seeing that move. Confuse Ray, on the other hand, is a bit annoying because the status condition messes Articuno up. That being said, I do get enough hits through with Fly, and eventually her ace goes down, and I am moving on to the next guy who, of course, is really simple. I remember as a kid sweeping this team with Articuno like it was nothing. I can just spam Ice Beam. Every single one of them is a 1-hit, with the exception of the Machamp, but it just goes for Karate Chop, doing very little, even with a crit, and that's that. Articuno is on fire against Agatha. The first Gengar sets up Substitute, then she switches it out, and I one-shot the Golbat. The Gengar comes back in, it's on low health, so it's easy to polish off, and then Articuno crits the following Haunter. Against Arbok, it has a 1-hit range with base damage, and that leads to her final Pokemon Gengar, and Ice Beam just freezes it. And I'm sure you know what's coming next, it's Lance, and yeah, after I knock out the Gyarados, which takes 2 hits, all of the remaining Pokemon are going to be 1-hits. The only way Articuno could lose here is due to its speed. The Aerodactyl is going to move first, and I think that a crit from Hyper Beam would do enough damage. It goes for this powerful normal type move, but it doesn't get a crit. Articuno survives and takes it out. Of course, I outspeed the Dragonite, so that's it for the Elite Four for the Ice type. Zapdos, on the other hand, starts off the league with a very confident performance against Lorelei. I 1-hit the Dugong, 1-hit the following Cloyster, 1-hit even the Slowbro. This thing usually survives. Apparently in this case, the Jinx is the bulky one. I don't really have good damage against it. I think Drill Peck would have got the 1-hit. Either way, Thunderbolt does it in 2. Last is Lapras. I was expecting a 1-hit here, but it just barely survives and hits with Blizzard. But Zapdos hangs on red, and that's that. Okay, so for the next fight, I actually do need to play the game. I'm going to use Mimic to steal Onix's Dig. This is just so I have super effective damage against the rock types. Things can be kind of annoying here because he has X-Defense. Yes, I'm not going to say his name. He does not deserve it in this video, especially when this is the last yellow video of the year. Once the first Onix goes down, things get much faster. I can use Dig to 2-shot the second one, and then Drill Peck on the Machamp. Again, it survives for the 3rd time, but he just uses an X-Defend and that's that. Of the 3 birds, it seems that Zapdos is the best suited to defeating Agatha. Drill Peck is fantastic against the ghosts, and Thunderbolt is good against the other Pokemon. The final Gengar does land a Confuse Ray, but it doesn't stop Zapdos from attacking, and with that, it's made it to Lance. First of all, I noted that my speed is 165, which is not enough to move first against the Aerodactyl. I really wasn't expecting that. That said, I am going to level up soon. Also, notably, after one-shotting the Gyarados, the first Dragonair uses Hyper Beam. It is never going to use Thunder Wave or Thunderbolt, which is a huge advantage for the electric type. these moves can really mess Pokemon up. The experience from knocking it out levels me up, still 168 speed, so Aerodactyl is moving first. Unless I teach Zapdos agility right now. However, I think the set of Thunderbolt, Mimic, Rest, and Drill Peck is just too good, so I say no and move on to the second Dragonair. On this one, I'm going to Mimic Ice Beam, and it uses its own, getting a critical hit, but Zapdos survives and knocks it out. Okay, Aerodactyl, please use Swift or Wing Attack, but in this case it chooses Hyper Beam, so that's that, I have to try Lance again. That being said, for this fight I used Rare Candies, so now I'm level 56, I have the outspeed on the Aerodactyl and Thunderbolt can just one-hit. Ice Beam of course can one-shot the Dragonite, and now all three legendary birds are ready for the champion. Moltres actually stacks up quite well against his team. Well, when I'm not missing Fire Blasts, that is. I do want to mention that this move has an incredible animation, definitely one of the best in Generation 1. I think the only one that's better is Hyper Beam, which I get to use immediately following the Sandslash's knockout on the Alakazam. We have slowed this footage down quite a bit, and I'm filling time with my voiceover, just so this animation isn't too flashy for all of you. If you're wondering why I turned on animations, I didn't actually. The game just does this for the champion fight to make it more intense. I've thought about modding it out, but that doesn't really feel like it's in the spirit of the challenge. Fire Blast 1 hits the Executor, and I move on to the Magneton. Okay, Fire Blast, please do enough, and unfortunately it doesn't, allowing the electric type to paralyze Moltres and then use Thunderbolt. This does almost half, so I'm moving on to the Cloyster in a very bad state. It goes for what is likely its weakest move, Aurora Beam. Moltres survives, hits Fire Blast, and it does enough damage, likely due to a critical hit. Last is Flareon. It sets up Reflect, giving me time to use Rest. In Generation 1, this doesn't recover my speed, but all I need is health, because then I have time to use Hyper Beam and knock the champion's ace out. Moltres clocks in with a final first playthrough time of 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 1 second, with 6 resets at level 64. This is a game time of 4 hours and 19 minutes. Overall, Moltres did quite poorly, and I was expecting that out of it. That said, if you didn't care about time, this thing is still quite capable. It does not feel as bad as a bunch of other Pokemon in the game. But I couldn't help but wonder how good it would be if it had Flamethrower throughout this entire run. Next against the champion is Articuno, and you might think that it would be better, but it really isn't. I'm going to set up agility against the Sandslash. This way, if I don't one-hit the Magneton and it paralyzes me, my speed will still be its regular value. After all, +6 multiplies your stats by 4, and then paralysis just divides it by 4. It's a net neutral interaction, and I really need this so that I'm going to move first against the Cloyster, because things are really going to slow down there. With my setup complete, I also have badge boosts, so I'm going to knock the Sandslash and the following Alakazam out in a single hit each. I haven't leveled up yet, so I knock the Executor out as well and move on to the Magneton. Okay, I still have my boosts. Maybe it's not going to paralyze me. However, even with them, my Ice Beam does not get the one-shot, but it uses Thunderbolt, so no paralysis. With the electric type fainting, I level up, losing my boosts, and Cloyster comes in. I played risky here, attacking with Fly, doing a little bit of damage, and it traps me in a clamp, taking Articuno down to 10 hit points. That said, I can just use Rest to heal, and Cloyster can't do that much damage to me each turn. The only reason Articuno would lose here is if it gets crit, and that doesn't end up happening, so I move on to the Flareon. Ice Beam does more than half, the Fire type goes for Flamethrower, which does massive damage, but not enough, and with that I have clocked in with my second legendary bird. Articuno gets a first playthrough time of 48 minutes and 51 seconds, with 6 resets at level 59. This is a game time of 3 hours and 2 minutes. Okay, so Articuno was easy as I expected it to be. That said, I did lose a lot of time against the Cloyster, and that's relevant, because Zapdos is going into the battle against the champion under 47 minutes. Is it maybe possible that Zapdos gets a competitive time with Articuno in its first playthrough? The champion's Sandslash isn't much of a threat, and it also gives me time to mimic a move, in this case Slash, which I can use to knock it out. Because of Zapdos' high base speed, this move always scores critical hits, and so it is doing slightly more damage than Drill Peck would be. Next is Alakazam. I continue using this move, but the powerful special attacker hangs on and uses Psychic. That said, Zapdos also lives with only 5 hit points. Because of that, I move on to the Executor and heal with Rest. As soon as Zapdos wakes up, it's ready to attack with Drill Peck. I take the Grass type to red health, and then to play safe, I rest up again and knock it out. Okay, time for the Magneton. I mimic Slash so I can knock this thing out in 2 hits, but I just barely don't have enough damage. It chips away at Zapdos using Swift, but the following Cloyster isn't a threat. Thunderbolt can easily secure the 1-hit. However, the final Flareon with Flamethrower could be, so I go for Rest, healing as much as I can. Then Flamethrower, in combination with a critical hit from Quick Attack, brings Zapdos to half health while it is still sleeping. Another Quick Attack chips away, so I have to rest again. Flamethrower hits, Quick Attack hits, and then Flareon takes a break using Reflect. This gives Zapdos the opening it needs to use Thunderbolt, doing half and also causing paralysis. As a result, Flareon fails to move not 1 turn, but 2 turns, giving Zapdos the knockout. The Electric type clocks in with a final first playthrough time of 48 minutes and 25 seconds, with 3 resets at level 58. This is a game time of 3 hours and 4 minutes. So that game time is higher than Articuno's, but the real time is lower, only by 26 seconds, but still, in its first playthrough, the Electric type was the fastest. Articuno was just barely in 2nd place, and of course, Moltres was in a very distant 3rd place. Like, that thing was more than 20 minutes behind these other 2 legendaries. That said, I think there's more room to optimize it, because Articuno and Zapdos already had quite competitive times. And with the slow growth rate, I really wasn't sure just how far I could push them. After playing these runs in August, I took some time off, and now that it's December, I have come back and done a lot of playthrough with these birds. I really wanted to get the best possible times with each one of them. That said, in the pursuit of optimization, a lot has to be sacrificed, so let's talk about it. Continuing the approach that I've had so far, let's start with Articuno. Starting with it also reflects the order in which I did these final playthroughs. There is a lot about these runs that I am very unsatisfied with, and I will mention those details as they come in each playthrough. If you've done any amount of solo running yourself, you'll know that getting a perfect run is almost impossible. To me, it feels very much like live musical performance. There are always small details that are off that can haunt you after the fact. With a legendary Pokemon, mistakes feel like making a mistake when performing a piece by Philip Glass. If you don't know, his music is just really repetitive, and one small imperfection will really stick out in a way that it wouldn't in something that's more complicated. The simplicity in these runs comes from the fact that all of them don't need to do a lot of optional training. Yes, even Moltres. When optimizing Articuno, I realized that in Viridian City, I can just skip the Pokemart entirely, because I'm going to be teaching it Fly, so I don't need to catch Pidgey in the forest. The reason that I go to the mart here is so that I can catch my flyer before reaching Pewter City, but that isn't required today, so that's a little bit of saved time. In Viridian Forest, I'm going to skip every optional bug catcher and only fight the required guy at the very end of the area. Experience from this battle levels Articuno up to 6, and then I take on Brock. Of course, his team is an easy sweep. The only way I could lose is if the Onix chains bind, but it's basically never going to do that. On Route 3, I fight only the mandatory trainers, choosing the bug catcher instead of the last, just due to type effectiveness. I fight only mandatory battles in Mount Moon, bringing me to Cerulean City at level 14. Here I should mention my solo running Discord. By the way, there is a link in the description if you want to join. I posed these 3 legendaries as a challenge to everyone, and a lot of great insights were shared in those channels. As has been the case in the past, Austin set some incredible times with these 3, and I ended up chasing his results. Because of a bunch of the powerful software that has been developed for solo challenges, he was able to share his route files as well as splits. These resources were absolutely foundational in me refining these 3 runs. Thank you so much, Austin. I really appreciate your work and the time you spend with me discussing all of these things behind the scenes. As you can see, the rival on Nugget Bridge was quite easy for Articuno to defeat, even starting the fight at level 14. On the next 2 routes, the only problem that Articuno has is the fact that it doesn't have much PP. Therefore, I have to backtrack to Nurse Joy once in order to heal. With my PP replenished, I can finish off all of the trainers on Route 25, and then outside of Cerulean City, I face the Rocket. If you look at Articuno's experience, it is close to leveling up, so now when I face the junior trainer in Misty's gym, it will level up to 20 before I face Misty. It turns out that Articuno is just really good at defeating her. Ice Beam is actually quite effective. It's going to be able to 2-hit the Staryu and 3-hit the Starmie. That is, if I don't get nice critical hits. Because in this case, I get 2, so the Starmie goes down in the same amount of time as the Staryu. Heading south without a heal, I teach Articuno Bubble Beam, which is useful to extend its PP, making all of Sandy's Pokemon fast to knock out. On the SSN, I pick up the TM for Rest. This is incredibly important for Articuno. I face the Gentleman in order to get the rare candy. I almost had a heart attack here because I thought the Jigglypuff trainer was going to catch me. Normally I go left and talk to the Gentleman, so I didn't really know what her range was. I'm glad it's not longer and he catches me first. The rival is incredibly easy to defeat. Ice Beam just sweeps his team. But after that, I have to face Surge. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but with the legendary Pokemon, he is actually terrifying. Not because he's consistent, don't worry, he still has no idea what he's doing. That said, if the Raichu just lucks into a Thunderbolt, it can be really bad. And as you can see here, when it gets a critical hit, Articuno faints, giving it 1 reset. You might think that skipping Surge is the better choice, but I don't think that's the case with Articuno. Actually, I don't think it's the case with any of the birds, and I'm going to talk about that choice in detail when discussing Moltres in a little bit. As you can see in my next fight, sometimes Raichu just doesn't know what to do. It misses or uses Growl, actually missing that one as well, and then Articuno gets what is essentially a free win. With Surge out of the way, let's talk about the optional trainers that I fight in the mid-game because there are very few. The Rocket to gain access to the hideout for 1 extra rare candy. I buy 2 Pokédolls in the department store, 1 for Mimic and 1 for the Ghost, and then I purchase 2 Calcium. I teach Articuno Fly, and on Cycling Road I resume my training. Here I fight the first member of the Weezing duo. This guy with Primeape and Machoke, he's probably going to get art at some point because I'm fighting him a lot in these playthroughs. After that, I fight the cool trainer in Erica's gym, and then crush the Grass-type gym leader. Okay, so are you ready for the major player mistake of this run? Inside of Koga's gym, I path incorrectly and run into the guy with Hypno at the beginning of the gym. In my videos, I haven't really found a good way to explain why these mistakes occur, because for you, I can imagine it seems very frustrating. For me, I am currently playing my 4th attempt with Articuno. I have done 3 in a single day, and right now I am feeling very fatigued, but I am still trying to push my time down lower. In instances like this, 1 lapse of judgment or concentration can result in a small error like this that accumulates a lot of time. When I am doing these runs, there are so many instances where I will just stop, restart the entire playthrough again when I make an error like this. However, at some point you do eventually just need to finish a playthrough, and I decided to do that here today with this run. It just unfortunately turns out for me that this is the best time that I got with Articuno, so yeah, it's the run that makes it into the video and there's this annoying mistake in it. I quantified the amount of time that was lost due to this, and it ends up being 26 seconds of real time. Keep that in mind for later because it will be relevant for some comparisons. In the rest of the gym, I face the Tamer and then the mandatory jugglers. This brings Articuno up to level 35, and this lets me use 5 rare candies to boost it to level 40 before facing Koga. I have guaranteed 1 hits on all 3 of the Venonats. Now before the Venomoth comes out, I need to set the record straight, because in my Rhydon vs Golem video, my Rhydon solo video, I said that this thing was a bug poison type. Of course, it is a fire electric type, but Articuno doesn't have any problems with it, provided Koga doesn't set up a lot of double teams. Inside Pokemon Mansion, I pick up the TM for Blizzard, then after defeating the Machoke Grunt in Sylph, I'm going to teach this move in the place of Peck. My moveset's going to look a little bit weird because I have both Ice Beam and Blizzard. Don't worry, it's going to make sense in a second. After I knock out the rival's Sandslash, I have to go up against the Cloyster, and as we saw before, it takes a long time to finish off. Using Ice Beam, I have a 25% chance to knock it out in 3 turns, but using Blizzard, I have a 37% chance. So that's why I want this move early on. It's hopefully going to speed this up. I don't get the 3 hit, I have to take it out over 5 actually due to a potion, which is quite frustrating. This leaves Articuno with orange health by the time the Magneton comes out. We've seen this situation before. I try for a 1-hit using Blizzard, but I don't get it. However, Magneton doesn't finish me, so I still take it down. After that I can use Fly to knock out the Kadabra, and I get a lucky critical hit with Blizzard on the Flareon, knocking it out in only 1 turn. Before Sabrina, it's time to use rare candies, a total of 5 in this case. It gives me outspeeds on both the Abra and the Kadabra, so I will one-hit both of them using Fly. Of course, the Alakazam can be inconsistent, but if I get a critical hit, it will go down in one turn, and that's what happens here. At level 48, I have guaranteed 2 hits on Blaine's first 2 Pokemon using Ice Beam, and then an 84% chance to 2-hit the Arcanine using Blizzard. One small frustration of my current route is that I do not outspeed Giovanni's Dugtrio, giving it a chance to use Sand Attack. I think if I came back to do this route, I would use 2 Carbos in the department store just to prevent this. Just so you have all the information, if I only used 1 Carbos in the department store and 1 Calcium, I would then speed tie the Dugtrio. One other thing making this fight a little bit slower is that Blizzard misses on the Persian, and then I have to take 2 turns with Ice Beam to knock it out. Before the rival on Route 22, I'm going to teach this legendary Pokemon Toxic in the place of Bubble Beam. Credit for this strategy goes to Austin. In this case, I could have used Toxic against the Cloyster to speed things up a little bit, but I still have Blizzard on my set, so I figured that would be the faster approach. The Magneton that follows is a 46% chance to knock out, and then the Kadabra and the Flareon are both much easier. Notably, the final Fire type does between 46 and 55% damage with Flamethrower, so at my current health I will survive it. Also in this case I just freeze, so it wasn't a problem at all. Before the league I teach Articuno Rest in the place of Blizzard, and then I face Lorelei. This battle alone bleeds so much time from Articuno's run. I tried so many different approaches here to speed this fight up, Double Edge and even Sky Attack, but in the end Toxic is just the thing that can get the job done. Fly is useful to stack up the Toxic counter, and I can also use Rest whenever I get to low health to heal. This buys time, but also gives Articuno the sustainability that it needs to get through a very long battle. Even utilizing this strategy, there is not a guarantee of success. All of her Pokemon can deal decent damage to Articuno, especially the Lapras, using moves like Hydro Pump. Not to mention the status conditions it can inflict with Body Slam and Confuse Ray. If the legendary Ice type doesn't get a heal off when it needs it, then this is going to be an awfully painful reset. Contextualizing the Hypno mistake earlier on in the run, the reason I decided to keep playing is specifically because if I can get by Lorelei in my first attempt, then this run will be fantastic. If I had had a reset to her here, I would have just restarted the entire playthrough because at that point I would know that it wouldn't be competitive results. At least when compared with my current finishes. Today Articuno makes it through the fight, so let's continue with the league. Against Agatha, there is another potential loss condition. Basically, you're not going to one-hit the Gengars, and if they put you to sleep, then you could lose. I think in the future I should teach Mimic in the place of Toxic and utilize Substitute for this fight, making things just a little bit more consistent, but that also bleeds time, so making it through the fight without Mimic is actually a benefit for me today. Before Lance, I am going to teach this move, and then the fight is fairly straightforward. I have the chance to learn Agility, and in this case I put it in the place of Rest. I finish Lance off, use 1 rare candy, and then battle the champion. For this fight, I need to set up with Agility 3 times to boost all of my damage ranges with physical moves. The worst possible thing that could happen to my Articuno is getting poisoned by the Sandslash, and that happens turn 1 before I do most of my setup. Following this, I'm going to Mimic Earthquake. The reason I set up with Agility first is because it raises Articuno's defense, making it more durable to the punishment that Sandslash is going to dish out. With 3 Agilities, Ice Beam is going to one-hit the Sandslash as well as the Executor. Fly has a 73% chance to knock out the Alakazam in one hit, and Earthquake has a 76% chance to knock out the Magneton in one hit. Because of Poison, I'm forced to use Earthquake on the Alakazam, and in this case it only has a 51% chance to knock out. I don't get it, so that's a reset for Articuno. In the next battle I don't get poisoned, so I'm able to make it to the Magneton with just above half health. I get the damage range I need with Earthquake, knocking it out, and I move on to the Cloyster. In this specific case, Earthquake is going to be the fastest way to knock it out, even though it will take time. The fear here is that the Cloyster will get a critical hit and knock me out quickly, but it doesn't happen, so I take it down and move on to the Flareon. With Earthquake, I'm able to take it to red health. Luckily, the Flareon misses a Fire Spin, and I knock it out, clocking in with Articuno's final time of 37 minutes and 59 seconds. This is with 2 resets at level 57, and a game time of 2 hours and 28 minutes. These are of course fantastic results. You could even call them legendary, and with them Articuno earns itself the 2nd place overall in my tier list. I'm sure that some of you are thinking that final battle against the champion was pretty sketchy with Articuno, and yes it was. That is another reason I kept playing after the Hypno mistake. With the Ice type, it really feels like all of the game is simple, with the exception of Lorelei and then later the champion. If you're wondering if facing a different rival team would be faster for Articuno, the answer is no, because then I bleed time earlier on into the run. This lowers its potential final time ceiling, so I think that the current method is the fastest way. That said, it's not the most consistent. And speaking of consistency, when the goal is to go fast, you really do have to take some risks. And going into the playthrough with Zapdos, I really thought that sketchy play was going to be the name of the game. But that isn't in fact how things turn out. Unlike Articuno, it is not going to learn Fly, so I go to the Viridian City Mart and I buy 2 Pokeballs. This is very specifically because Zapdos is really bad at catching Pidgey. If the Pidgey is a low level, it will knock it out with Drill Peck, and it's always going to one-shot them using Thunder Shock. I essentially just have to throw my Pokeballs at them without damaging the Pidgeys and hope that I end up catching them. Over the course of doing these Zapdos runs, I restarted so many times just because I failed to get the Pidgey and I didn't want to have to waste time catching a Doduo later on. I think this is probably the least consistent part of Zapdos' playthrough, and that is absolutely hilarious because Brock is the first gym leader. As was the case in my last playthrough, fighting all of the bug catchers as well as the junior trainer in his gym brings Zapdos to level 10, and this is enough to defeat the rock-type specialist with a good first split. In this case, Zapdos clocks in with a time of 3 minutes and 36 seconds. We're going to make a major time jump now into Misty's gym. I defeat the junior trainer, leveling Zapdos up to 16, and then I take on the water-type specialist. Overall, this fight's pretty straightforward. This is the closest result I had against her because Starmie takes Zapdos to 1 hit point with Bubble Beam. But a win is a win, so it doesn't matter. The rival is simple because Thundershock 1-hits the Spearow and Drill Peck can 2-shot the Sandshrew. Of course, Sand Attack could mess things up here, but not today. On Route 25 there is this hiker. I specifically want to note his Geodude because normally Zapdos will knock it out in 2 hits. This happens if it gets a critical hit, and throughout the 11 attempts that I completed with this electric bird, it happened more often than not. Unfortunately, in my best time, I was unable to get it, so this fight takes a little bit more time. And since we have it now, let's review Zapdos' back sprite. A lot of people say this Pokemon looks like Big Bird from Sesame Street, and honestly, it kind of does, but it doesn't really bother me. However, when you consider this back sprite, it definitely looks like Big Bird here. This is definitely the middle of the road back sprite. Articuno's is definitely the best, and Moltres has the worst one. On the SSN, I pick up the TM for Rest. It is once again going to be very important. And then I fight an optional trainer, this Fisher, with 3 Pokemon on his team. This is critically important for Zapdos' success over the next small portion of the game. The experience from this fight brings Zapdos up to level 23, and then the fight from the gentleman with the rare candy, as well as the rival, brings it up to level 24, where it has 64 speed. Right before I go into Surge's gym, I am going to use 1 rare candy to ensure that Zapdos moves first against him. This might seem like a little bit of overkill against a gym leader who is known for being kind of trash, but with Zapdos, that's not the case because it doesn't have any moves that are neutrally effective against the Raichu. If my attack stat isn't modified and I don't get a critical hit, Zapdos is going to 4-shot. Every time I tried this fight without the rare candy, things went very badly for me and I had time lost here. Plus, a reset at this point in the game is more costly for Zapdos than it is for Articuno because the electric type had to do more training in order to defeat Brock. You'll also notice that I have Rest on my moveset, and no, this is not really helpful against Surge. You just need to get lucky here and knock out the Raichu, which I do with a critical hit. The self-destructing hiker can waste a lot of Zapdos' time if his Pokemon don't self-destruct, or when they self-destruct 1 turn before I knock them out with Drill Peck. Overall though, with Rest, Zapdos doesn't have problems here. Alright, time for the mid-game training. Let's talk about the optional battles. Of course, the Rocket in the Game Corner to get access to 1 more rare candy. Then I go straight to Erica's gym, facing the Cool Trainer, and then defeating the Grass-type Specialist. After that, in the department store, I pick up 1 TM for Reflect, and then I buy 3 Protein. I teach Zapdos Reflect in the place of Thundershock, and then on Cycling Road, I face the Cue Ball as well as the Biker. These 2 battles bring it up to level 33, and then I use 5 rare candies to boost it up to level 38. Hopefully you can see that Zapdos is starting to speed up when compared with Articuno. I can face Koga after defeating only the mandatory trainers in this section of the game because Drill Peck is fantastic against his Venonats. I have 1 hits on the first 3, and then against Venomoth I'm going to knock it out in 2 hits. Next is the rival in Sylph, and this is usually the first battle where I was expecting a reset could happen. Drill Peck has a 3-hit against the Sand Slash, giving it ample time to use Sand Attack once. In this case though, it doesn't use it, so Zapdos is set up for success. I one-shot the Cloyster, and then the Magneton slows down. Yes, Thunderbolt is the best move to use against it. From there I can one-hit the Kadabra and two-hit the final Flareon. On my way to Cinnabar Island, I face this Fisher. He is fantastic for training, and then I go up against Sabrina. Drill Peck is able to one-hit her first two Pokemon. I don't outspeed the Alakazam, but it doesn't really matter. After all, Drill Peck does significant damage, and I have a high % chance to crit. With that victory under my belt, I use Rare Candies again, this time 4, to bring Zapdos up to level 47 before facing Blaine. Early on in the process of optimizing Zapdos, I thought that I needed level 55 in order to defeat Giovanni. In that case, with one use of Reflect, Rock Slide from the Rhydon is not going to be able to knock me out before I use 3 Earthquakes and finish it off. If my level gets lower and lower, the Rhydon's damage increases, and my damage from Earthquake decreases. Also at level 48, my damage range against the Dugtrio is 71%, and I didn't really like that because then it potentially could have another turn to set up with Sand Attack. It does already get 1 because I am mimicking Earthquake. But the reason I eventually decided to face Giovanni 2 levels lower is because even here, Zapdos has these same damage ranges against the Rhydon. Sometimes this happens where the fight is kind of level agnostic due to the Pokemon's critical hit rate. Because of all that, I decided using the Rare Candies before Blaine was the safer choice for that fight. And now as we go into this fight, I want to describe an alternative option for Zapdos in beating Giovanni. If I'm using level 50, I can use the Nidoking to badge boost me with Leer, then Zapdos will have enough attack to 2-hit the Rhydon, and I can survive 1 use of Rock Slide due to Reflect. With my current strategy, if I take too much damage early on into the fight, then Zapdos can lose once it makes it to the Rhydon. However, I am getting a little bit more consistent Blaine fight, and I'm not having to waste time training here in Giovanni's gym. Also in general, the Rhydon is not particularly competent. Sometimes Giovanni will use a guard spec on it, and Rock Slide can also miss, which is what happens here. It is worth noting that even with the best possible damage roll, Zapdos would have survived its next Rock Slide. The rival on Route 22 is pretty straightforward. I use Mimic to steal Slash because it can deal more damage than Drill Peck to specific Pokemon like the Magneton and Kadabra. The worst case scenario in this fight is the Sandslash uses Slash a lot, which is exactly what happens here. So I'm at orange health for the remainder of the battle. Luckily, Execute and Cloyster are both 1-hits, and the Magneton is going to be a 2-hit using Slash. Confusion messes Zapdos up a little bit. Luckily, the Kadabra doesn't go for Psychic on the 2 turns I hit myself, and I knock it out. Okay, last is Flareon. Slash does more than half. It uses Smog, which doesn't do much, and with that, I've won. Okay, Lorelei is very straightforward for Zapdos. The only thing I want to mention here is that I am using Mimic to steal Amnesia and set up once. This is to ensure that I have the 1-hit against the Jinx so it doesn't use Ice Punch and occasionally freeze Zapdos. This same logic applies to the Lapras because it was going to be a 2-hit before the use of the setup move. For Zapdos, I'm using Substitute against Agatha just to make the fight a little bit more consistent. Against Lance, the only thing that can go wrong is the second Dragonair causing a freeze with Ice Beam, but not today, and with that, I have made it to the champion. Before the fight, I use 1 Rare Candy, bringing Zapdos to level 55. I say no to Agility, and now let's see how the final battle goes. My initial intuition was that mimicking Earthquake from the Sandslash and using it later on in the fight was the better play. However, after a significant amount of frustration trying that strategy, it ended up not being the better play. So in this case, I am using the Brain Dead strategy, just spamming Drill Peck all the time against Sandslash, Alakazam, and Executor. Austin and I discussed this in detail and at length. The Earthquake strategy can work and is definitely more reliable if you have a recovery move. That said, because of my current set and how the playthrough has gone to this point, I no longer have access to Rest. If you're using Earthquake, you can't Mimic Recover from Alakazam, and by the way, that is a strategy that we toyed around with when using this Drill Peck spam strategy. However, that is conditionally useful, and I don't think it is the best play for Zapdos, because I want to spend the least amount of time battling the Alakazam so that it doesn't use Kinesis. So as I finish the Executor off and Magneton comes in, let's just pause. Let's reflect on the run summary for Zapdos' playthrough to this point. Is there a way to use Rest against the self-destructing Hiker and then maintain it all the way to the end of the game? If I wanted to do that, then I would have to change how I face Giovanni. Zapdos has to give up either Reflect or Mimic. Here are the damage ranges for the Giovanni fight. If we quickly examine Rhydon's Rock Slide, yeah, it seems like Reflect is required. So if we give up Mimic, then 4 of his Pokemon need to be knocked out using Drill Peck, and this move is really not going to do wonders against the Rhydon. But there are ways to make this work. For example, I can use Mimic to steal Double Team from the Persian, set this up, so that the Rhydon can never hit me with Rock Slide, and then, over time, I can use Drill Peck to knock it out. But investing a full playthrough trying that and then getting knocked out on the Rhydon just didn't feel like it would be satisfying. Maybe there is a way to be even more consistent. If you look at my rules, they ban glitches outside of battle, but they leave glitches within battle as fair game. This is just because the Generation 1 battle engine is so messed up that if I banned glitches, I basically wouldn't be able to play these games. Plus, the in-battle glitches are really fun and they add so much flavor to these videos, I think we would objectively have less interesting content if I just took them all out. With glitches on the table, I can utilize an absolutely hilarious strategy with Zapdos. In Viridian City Gym, I can face this tamer who has an Arbok and a Tauros. During this battle, I can use Mimic to steal Screech. Yeah, this seems weird, right? I want the Arbok to have time so that it uses Glare, paralyzing Zapdos. After that, I can just knock out both of his Pokemon and then go to Giovanni where I use a potion to heal that is not going to cure my status. Then against Dugtrio, I can Mimic Dig. Can we just take a moment to appreciate what's happening here? I am using an electric flying type legendary Pokemon to mimic a ground type move while paralyzed. This is ironic on so many levels, I absolutely love it. What's even funnier is this allows me to trigger a glitch. When Zapdos uses Dig and goes underground, an invulnerability flag is set in the RAM. If while it is underground trying to use the 2-turn move, it is paralyzed, then Zapdos will be taken out of Dig, but the invulnerability flag will not be reset. For the rest of the fight, as long as I do not use Dig again, Zapdos cannot be hit by Giovanni's moves. This is the reason that both Dig and Fly are banned in Generation 1 competitive. Now this strategy seems amazing because once I defeat Giovanni, I am going to have rest for the champion. That said, just having to use rest during the champion fight is going to waste time, and as a result, I unfortunately get a better time with the Brain Dead strategy. So let's resume the footage we were watching previously. The Magneton's best move is Swift, so I can knock it out slowly using Thunderbolt as it chips away at me. Actually, getting a critical hit in this case, which was very scary. Zapdos gets its own crit, finishing it off. Against Cloyster, I obviously get the one hit, and now Flareon just needs to not use Quick Attack or Flamethrower. And at the pivotal moment, Zapdos gets a Gen 1 miss with Thunderbolt. Flareon misses Fire Spin, then goes for Quick Attack. Zapdos survives on 18 hit points, uses Thunderbolt, gets a crit, but it's not enough. This gives the Flareon another chance to use Quick Attack, but it doesn't. Zapdos uses Thunderbolt and clocks in with its final time. 37 minutes and 22 seconds. 0 resets, level 56, and a game time of 2 hours and 28 minutes. If we compare these two birds' final times, Zapdos, the electric type, is once again faster. Even if I subtract all the time lost during the Hypno fight in Koga's gym, Zapdos is still faster than Articuno. And all of that said, I do think that Zapdos' time could be significantly lower if I just cut more optional battles out of the mid-game. This would require a lot of luck to get through Giovanni if you're using the Earthquake strategy, which is definitely the fastest way to defeat him. That said, since Zapdos has so much wiggle room, it is definitely the best legendary bird to solo the game with. And today with these results, it displaces Articuno out of the second place spot. We have an S-tier electric type, and it feels so good. But you know what the opposite of feeling good is? Playing the game with Moltres. Of the three, I refined its playthrough last, specifically so I'd have the most experience for it, since it is the most difficult. This had a consequence for the production of this video. I am now sitting here on December 23rd recording this voiceover after my video editor has gone on vacation. Also, like Zapdos, I did so many Moltres playthroughs, a total of 12. I expected the process of refining its playthrough to be very rough, and yes, in a lot of ways it was, but it did this in a very surprising and interesting way. Let's talk about it. Like Articuno, Moltres is also going to learn Fly, so I'm going to skip the mart in Viridian City. Upon arriving in the forest, there is an interesting choice to make with Moltres. Do you use Peck against the bugs, or do you use Fire Spin? Fire Spin is going to give Moltres the fastest forest time, because it's going to prevent the opponent Pokemon from wasting turns attacking. That said, it's very inconsistent, so I'm going for Peck. Also, this has a secondary advantage. Because I am not using Fire Spin's PP, then once I defeat the mandatory bug Bug Catcher, I can proceed to Pewter City and skip the Pokemon Center. Every time you heal, it costs about 5 seconds of real time, so avoiding this is very advantageous in a run that's going to be this tight. Inside Brock's gym, I face the Junior Trainer, and I want to go through the details of this battle. If Peck gets a critical hit, it will knock the Diglett out in 1 turn, saving some time. I'm also going to use 1 turn of Fire Spin against the Sandshrew, which both improves my odds against Brock because I will have more HP, and it also speeds the fight up. That said, if I miss, I can't afford to use more PP against this thing because I need it all for Brock. I don't want to backtrack to the Pokemon Center to heal. After defeating the Sandshrew, as well as all of the bug catchers in Viridian Forest, Moltres is level 10 and I can face Brock. The split that I'm expecting here is somewhere between 3 minutes and 20 seconds and 3 minutes and 35 seconds. It really depends on how the RNG goes. Also, it's worth noting that I can lose here if Fire Spin is just too inaccurate and I run out of PP. The lower range of the split is only accomplishable if I get critical hits knocking Brock's Pokemon out more quickly. The upper range of the time is only possible if Moltres gets critical hits, speeding the fight up, so I'm expecting to usually be around the 3 minute and 30 second mark. But in this case I have good luck and Moltres gets a 3 minute and 26 second split. As I journey out of Pewter City, I stop by the mart to grab 3 antidotes and 1 paralyze heal. This is very important for Moltres. I had some failed runs because I didn't pick these items up. I'll mention where they're relevant as the run progresses. On Route 3 I cut out all the battles so you can watch my PP as it depletes. Upon defeating the final bug catcher, Peck only has 4 uses left and Fire Spin is completely out. As a result of this, I'm going to have to do my first center heal right before Mount Moon. Then inside the cave, I fight 2 optional trainers here, the bug catcher as well as this lass. The rival on Nugget Bridge is fairly simple. I'm going to be using Fire Spin against both the Spearow and the Sandshrew. If Moltres is able to get by both of them with ease, then the rest of the battle is very simple. Sometimes due to bad sand attack luck or just Fire Spin being awful, I will have to heal at the Pokemon Center after this battle, and that can lose some time. While we watch the battle finish, I just want to mention the fact that the route that I'm currently playing is exactly the route that Austin shared with me. All of the credit for this goes to him. I'm hoping at some point in the new year I'll be able to feature him more prominently on the channel so that he can get more praise for his incredible work in these solo runs. I tried my best throughout the process of refining Moltres to add things to this route and improve upon it. I specifically wanted to make it more consistent. That said, at the end of 12 runs, I am very confident that this is the best route. As I mentioned in my first playthrough, on Nugget Bridge, occasionally the trainers that have Pidgey mess Moltres up. This is just because Fire Spin can miss and then the Pidgey can use Sand Attack. While I am using Fire Spin here, I think the safer play overall is just to use Peck. It's a guaranteed 2-hit, and because of that they only have 1 chance to use the accuracy lowering move. Heading south from Cerulean City, I fight this bug catcher. He is required for experience. Notably here, Fire Spin is the go-to move, just because this Butterfree's moveset is so strange. It has Poison Powder, Stun Spore, Sleep Powder, and Supersonic. If it inflicts a non-volatile status condition, then because of his AI, it is only going to use Supersonic, confusing you and making the fight really awful. This is one of the reasons that I needed to pick up those healing items earlier on in Pewter City. It's only really a bad fight if Fire Spin misses, and in this case it doesn't. Sandy's next. I think the safest approach here is just to spam Peck. It's a 2-hit against all of her Pokemon. After that on the SSN, I fight the Sailor to get the TM for a rest. Then I fight this Fisher who has fantastic experience yields, and the Gentleman to obtain the rare candy. All of this gives Moltres enough experience so that once I defeat the rivals team, I am about to level up to 24. My speed right now is 56, and I did contemplate fighting Misty with a tie against her Starmie. I also explored the idea of using 1 rare candy to go up from 23 to 24 to cut optional trainers. I was able to get rid of the bug catcher in Mount Moon, the Butterfree bug catcher, and the Fisher on the SSN. I tried another approach which was leveling up to level 23 before Misty or going to Vermilion City. Then I can use 1 rare candy to be level 24 and have the outspeed without significant backtracking. This is so much slower, like 1.5 to 2 minutes slower. It's just not worth it. So the approach that Austin figured out ended up being the best, which is once you defeat the Goldeen trainer in Misty's gym, Moltres levels up to 24 and it has 59 speed. Staruse first. I'm going to use Peck to knock it out in 2 turns. I'm doing this because yes, it can attack with Water Gun, but Misty can also use an X-Defend to do nothing. Going for Fire Spin and missing or just taking damage from Bide are both bad plays. And yes, I did mention Bide because Moltres' early moveset is so awful that this is the best move. Not just here against Misty's Starmie, but also coming up very soon. I'm going to explain that in a second. First of all, let's talk about this water type because it can cause a reset. In Generation 1, Bide can last 2 or 3 turns. If I get a 3-turn Bide and Misty's Starmie spams Bubble Beam, then Moltres is going to faint. Another way it can win is with a critical hit from Bubble Beam. That's what happens first turn in this battle. That said, Misty uses an X-Defend on the next turn, and then another Bubble Beam, which Moltres survives. It pays back damage, and one-shots her ace. Now I do make one small alteration to Austin's route, which is I go south to face Surge next. In his playthrough, he goes through Rock Tunnel, does a bunch of stuff in Celadon City and Saffron City before backtracking to Surge later on with Double Edge. This makes the battle against the electric types so much easier, but I don't think it's worth it for the time cost. Because when you get Surge's badge, then you can use Fly outside of battle. This will allow me to navigate the mid-game faster. Okay, so I have a hilarious strategy against Surge. It's again to use Bide. I said it was going to be useful, and here it is. The Raichu can knock me out, but I'm basically counting on the fact that it's going to miss or go for Growl, or Surge is going to use an X-Speed at some point. It'll do some damage, in this case in the form of 2 Mega Punches, Moltres unleashes energy, and one-shots. In Rock Tunnel, I have to rely on Fire Spin against the self-destructing hiker, but I never had any problems here. His Pokemon are just too inconsistent because they don't know that they should be going for Rock Throw every turn. Okay, so I've arrived in Celadon City, and because I have the Thunder Badge, I'm going to go straight to the Fly House, pick up the HM, and teach it to Moltres. I can then easily get back to the Pokemon Center using the Field Move, Heal, as well as deposit some items. In Celadon City, I grab the PP up, I defeat the Rocket to gain access to the hideout. There's another PP up here, I fight another optional trainer with 2 Machops. This gives me access to the TM for Double Edge, and then finally in this area, I grab the Rare Candy. Before the department store, I go to the Celadon Gym, fight the Cool Trainer, and then defeat Erica. We're not even going to watch the footage, it's so easy. Doing the gym first gives me more money for the department store, so now I can buy 4 protein instead of 3. It's important to do this now because I'm going to the fighting dojo next to do training. In here I have 2 hit ranges with Fly on some of the fighting types. The additional protein really help in knocking these Pokemon out in one hit, saving time. Just before I fight the rival in Pokemon Tower, I'm going to teach Double Edge in the place of Peck. I kept the weak flying type move in the fighting dojo because it was useful against some of the weaker Pokemon like Mankey. Against the rival I go for Fire Spin first because the Fearow is going to be a 2-hit. I don't want to waste time with a bunch of flies or have them reflected back at me by the Fearow's mirror move. After knocking it out, Double Edge has 1 hits on his 4 remaining Pokemon, so it saves time to use the recoil move. This is the final Pokemon Yellow video of the year, and I think it's fitting to acknowledge the character development. I am actually using Double Edge, and I am recognizing its benefits. I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back for that. Good job, Scott. On Cycling Road, I grab the PP up. I have mentioned these 3 because they will be useful for Fire Blast when I obtain it. After that, I fight the Cue Ball as well as the Biker, but I am going to show this second fight because my damage ranges on the Coughing are very unfortunate. At just level 35, I would have a 90% chance to knock them out, but it's only a 34% chance at level 34. In my attempts to make this route faster in the mid-game, I tried using 1 rare candy once I reached level 34 to get to level 35 to speed this fight up. It turns out that means I get to Lance at level 59 instead of level 60, and I need level 60 to ensure that I can get 2 hits against his Gyarados. And I don't even have a good probability of 2-hitting that thing. Level 59 is just kind of unacceptable unless you want to wait for a Hydro Pump miss, and I didn't want to. The unfortunate damage ranges continue in Koga's gym against the first Juggler. I don't have guarantees against any of these Psychic-type Pokemon. This route fights both Tamer and Koga's gym, and they're kind of annoying because the Arboks have Glare and the Sandslash has Sand Attack. Things can go very wrong here. Also note, I get poisoned, so this is another reason those early healing items are important. The second Tamer gives Moltres enough experience to level up to 37, and then I face Koga. This fight has inherent inconsistencies because Fly isn't a guarantee against the Venonats. The first 2 are above a 90% chance each, but the third one is only a 53% chance. Today I get the favorable damage rolls and move on to the Venomoth. This thing is a 92% chance to knock out with Fly over 2 hits, but it's also going to use double teams sometimes. In those cases, I want 1 Fly to hit, and then I want to knock it out with Double Edge so that I have more chances to roll for the hit. The experience of this battle levels Moltres up to 38, and then after flying to Palatown, I use 2 rare candies to take it to level 40. When I first saw Austin's route, this was the first thing I wanted to change. I was like, why would you use 2 rare candies before Blaine? You can just fight him at level 38 and not have a problem. Turns out these two rare candies make all of the battles in the next little section of the game a lot easier, and they also line up the levels so that I'm going to reach 45 right before Giovanni. Even if I take these rare candies out and position them later on into the route, I will still end up at the same level for Giovanni. Because of this, the right choice is to use them now to make the next section of the game easier. One major impact they have is giving the outspeed on the Ninetales. As you can see from my Moltres' moveset, I am using Toxic. This is because Fly just doesn't do enough damage to his Fire-type Pokemon. There's an alternative strategy here, which is to use Reflect in the place of Fire Spin and then just stall him out using Rest. This is overall the safer strategy, but it isn't as fast, because while Fire Spin doesn't do a lot of damage to his Fire-type Pokemon, it does help stack up the Toxic counter. In this case, since I'm going for the riskier strategy that has the potential to be faster, I do have one reset against Blaine. The reason that occurred is because both Ninetales and Rapidash did not badge boost me with either Tail Whip or Growl. If they do, then Moltres is faster than all of Blaine's Pokemon, and stacking up Toxic with Fire Spin is just so much easier. In Sylph, I fight only the mandatory trainers, and then I take on the rival. The whole reason that I fought Blaine early is so that I have good damage ranges with Fire Blast here. It can one-hit the Sandslash and the Cloyster. Against the Magneton, I only have a 54% chance to knock it out because it is not yet a Steel type. But once it's defeated, Fly one-shots the Kadabra and is going to two-hit the Flareon. Fire Blast also helps speed things up against Jesse and James because I can one-hit their Wheezing instead of having to two-hit. And the powerful Fire move continues its spree against Giovanni, one-hitting all of his Pokemon. This is with favorable damage rolls and accuracy because Fire Blast only has a 58% chance to knock out the Nidoqueen. After that, I stop by Copycat's house to pick up the TM for Mimic, and then I face Sabrina. My speed is the important thing to look at in this fight because I can move first against both the Abra and the Kadabra, one-shotting them with Fly. After that, I use Fire Blast on the Alakazam. This is specifically because it moves first and it can set up Reflect, or she can use an X-Defend. I don't want to give her time to do those things using Fly, and also Fire Blast can crit or burn, which would speed up my progress. After defeating Sabrina, I pick up the rare candy in the power plant, and inside of Viridian City Gym, I fight one optional trainer, bringing Moltres up to level 45. This is the target level, so that with 5 rare candies, it will be level 50 to face Giovanni. But there's one more thing that I do before that battle, which of course is teaching Mimic in the place of Toxic. The rare candies ensure that I move first against the Dugtrio and the Persian. This is important so that I can knock the first one out without getting hit by Sand Attack. Then, on his second Pokemon, I Mimic Double Team, and I'm gonna set this up. I really wanted the Paralysis strategy to work with the Arbok. I tried it so many different ways, I had to save so much time during the mid-game, but in the end it is just not as consistent. Number 1, you can fail to mimic it against the Arbok because that thing can just screech and then knock you out. Also, sometimes you get paralyzed to knock the Arbok out, but then Tauros stops you. And even if you make it to Giovanni, there is no guarantee that Fly will trigger the glitch. Sometimes you just get lucky, Paralysis never activates, and Rhydon knocks you out with Rock Slide. This is disappointing because the base time investment for that strategy is higher than the double team strategy, so yeah, evasion ends up being the answer that Moltres has to use. Once I'm set up to +6, I have so many badge boosts that it's easy to knock out his remaining Pokemon. The Rhydon does survive because of a critical hit, but it doesn't end up mattering because it misses Rock Slide, and that's that. The only inconsistency against the rival before the league is the Magneton. Fire Blast only has a 40% chance to knock it out in one hit. Today the game favors me because I get a critical hit, knocking it out in one turn, and with that, Moltres has made it to Victory Road. I grab the rare candy and then I fight 3 trainers. The cool trainer in the entrance area, the black belt in the second area, and the tamer that's in the next area. This is a mistake because I just barely don't have enough experience to get to 53, so I have to face a wild Pokemon to knock it out to gain the level I need to use 5 rare candies to get to level 58 before Lorelei. Just so everyone knows, in Austin's route, if you fight the Juggler and then the cool trainer male that has Executor, Cloyster, and Arcanine, Moltres will level up to 53 with only 2 trainer battles, so that is obviously the better choice. Lorelei is fairly simple. I should be going for Fly turn 1, hoping the Dugong uses Rest turn 2, but I just went into it with Fire Blast and I crit getting the 1 hit, so that's perfect luck. Cloyster is a guaranteed 1 hit provided Fire Blast hits, and then on the Slowbro, I'm going to set up Amnesia twice so that I can 1 hit all of her 3 remaining Pokemon using the Fire type move. The next trainer is so simple because Fire Blast 1 hits every single team member he has. Like was the case with the other 3 legendaries, there are 2 ways to play Agatha, either Mimic Substitute or just try to sweep. In this case, I go for the safer play because I am on track to clock in with my best time yet. I was very happy with this Moltres run. But even the best of runs can come to a grinding halt because Lance is so much RNG. The entire run has synergized around the fact that I need level 60 to face him, but even this level does not give particularly good damage ranges against his Gyarados. I have a 45% chance to knock it out in 2 turns, and I am likely going to 2-hit the following Dragonair, which can cause problems because it knows both Thunder Wave and Thunderbolt. In this case, I make it past the Gyarados, but I miss my fly on the Dragonair. It uses Thunder Wave, and as a result, I'm paralyzed. There is no way to recover the lost speed. Unfortunately, due to the status condition, Moltres has its second reset here. In the following fight, I'm able to heal against the first Dragonair and move on to the second one, where I mimic Ice Beam. The problem is with my speed cut, I will take damage from his final 3 Pokemon before knocking them out with the powerful Ice-type move. I had green health, and this is a good scenario for Moltres, but the Aerodactyl does damage, and then Dragonite crits with Thunder, knocking Moltres out. Editor Scott here, I failed to mention the 1 critical hit Gyarados gets, which one-shots Moltres. In the next fight, I make it back to the Dragonite around the same amount of health. This time it goes for Blizzard, and like I said before, I have a chance to survive these moves. Moltres uses Ice Beam, and Dragonite faints. Okay, so we have arrived at the champion. By the way, for the Fire-type Legendary, this fight is fairly straightforward. Mimic Earthquake, and then knock the Sandslash out with Fire Blast. Fly has a 63% chance to knock the Alakazam out, and then Fire Blast has a guarantee against the Executor. The Magneton is the biggest liability here. I only have a 70% chance to knock it out. I get the favorable range, move on to the Cloyster, Moltres doesn't miss, and with that, I have a guarantee with Earthquake on the Flareon, so Moltres clocks in with a final time of 47 minutes and 46 seconds, with 4 resets at level 62. This is a game time of 3 hours and 1 minute. Now that I've finished my runs with all 3 legendary birds, let's compare the data. The splits demonstrate how similar Zapdos and Articuno are in terms of finishing the game. However, it's very interesting to see how different the runs actually are. Moltres, on the other hand, is so much slower than both of these Pokemon, primarily due to the fact that the Misty split takes forever. Also, Moltres took longer at Blaine because I had 1 reset there, and it also had 3 resets against Lance. Looking at levels by trainer, we can see that Moltres really did need the highest level of the 3. Articuno finished 1 level higher than Zapdos, but overall those two were very similar. Just a small tip for reading these graphs, if there is a negative slope, I did not go back in time. The splits were just done in different orders between playthroughs. Game time by trainer is also interesting. You can see how similar Zapdos and Articuno are. I think the only reason the electric type outperformed today is because Articuno takes more time against Lorelei and in the mid game. As you can see in the earliest portions of the game, it is far ahead of Zapdos. Once again, unfortunately for our Fire-type fans, this graph does not look very good for Moltres. Its game time is just so much higher than all the others throughout the entire run. Actually, except for the first split against Brock, where it outpaced Zapdos just slightly. But that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. If I was going to sit down and do these playthroughs all again now, and I had to predict the time I would get in a single attempt, with Moltres I would say 50 minutes, with Zapdos I would say 40 minutes, and with Articuno I would also say 40 minutes. I had to put in so much effort and get a decent amount of luck to get these results with the legendary birds. But I figured as the Pokemon Yellow season finale, I should go above and beyond for this one. Just before we rank Moltres, I want to mention one thing that I've been thinking about this entire year, and that's the fact that my Pokemon are not ranked based on the number of attempts that I do with each one. If I ranked exclusively on first playthrough results, then all of the Pokemon played earlier on would have worse results. If I rank based on second or third or fourth playthroughs, then it's not really fair if one Pokemon gets extremely bad luck in that specific run, or if I make a major player mistake. The solution I came up with a long time ago was that I was just going to rank Pokemon based on their best time that I had achieved yet. This gives me the ability to come back to Pokemon later on and re-rank them when my skills have improved. But that does leave a flaw in my methodology. For this video, I completed a different number of runs per Pokemon. 4 with Articuno, 11 with Zapdos, and 12 with Moltres. Hopefully when watching my Articuno run, you realize that there was a lot of RNG that just lined up during that attempt. For that reason, I felt that doing more Articuno playthroughs would just end up wasting time. I'm going to acknowledge that there was a bias here because I felt that Moltres was going to take so long to optimize, and it did. 3 full days of playtime. And when I say full day, I mean wake up, do a little bit of voiceover, and then play Moltres until I go to sleep. At the end of these days, I had done 11 runs and I still had a result I was unsatisfied with, I was chasing Austin's incredible result of 45 minutes and 31 seconds. It felt like magic that he got that time with Moltres, and because I was unsatisfied, I came back and played a 4th day, getting this 12th playthrough, which was my best time. If, like in his playthrough, I had no resets, our times would have been very similar, so I decided to go with this for Moltres. And that's really what it comes down to. Some Pokemon require more time than others. Because this methodology has the ability to be unfair to Pokemon that are more consistent, I am going to start recording the number of attempts I take at each Pokemon, as well as the number of finishes that I have. For these 3, I attempted Articuno 10 times and finished 4 times. With Zapdos, I attempted 34 times and finished 11 times. And with Moltres, I attempted 29 times and finished a total of 12. This approach still leaves one flaw, which is the fact that not all attempts or finishes are made the same. For example, with Articuno, I was playing the final route that I had throughout the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th playthrough. Whereas with Moltres, I only settled on my final route on the 12th playthrough. Each attempt was so different as I tried to figure out ways to make Austin's route more consistent. For the best possible accuracy, really the only way to do it is decide on the route, and then from that point count attempts and finishes, as well as all of the other 4 metrics that I regularly report. I'm not sure I'm ever going to get there on this channel for single videos, but maybe, just maybe, in several years, once I've completed the Pokédex, we will be able to collect that data. Okay, so now let's rank Moltres in the tier list. With its final time of 47 minutes and 46 seconds, it earns itself a placement in the A tier, just behind Hitmonlee and just ahead of Poliwrath. I do want to bring up the fact that the first stage Pokemon Ghastly is ahead of Moltres, and Raticate is only 2 spots behind it. This is absolutely hilarious to me. Also, when I redo Raticate, it can definitely get a time under 45 minutes, so even its results will improve and it will surpass Moltres. As we go into 2024, I'm going to have to re-rank this tier list and adjust the times so it's not so top-heavy. That'll happen in the first Pokemon Yellow video of the new year. I'm taking time off from produced videos in January just to do some fun streaming. After all, December has been very demanding. So stay tuned for the next video in this series sometime in February. Finally, I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone who supports me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships. It really does mean the world to me. This is my dream job. Every day I get to work on being a Pokemon master. So thank you so much. If you've made it this far, you are incredible and you deserve a treat, so let's face Professor Oak. For Articuno, things are pretty straightforward. I can set up using Agility and then knock the Tauros out using Ice Beam. I was a little bit surprised that I didn't get the 1-hit, but I guess it is 9 levels higher than me. Executor goes down to a single hit. Arcanine is next. Now Oak does have 2 fire types, but once I defeat this one, the Charizard is a flying type, so it takes super effective damage from Ice Beam and goes down in 1 hit. Last is Gyarados. I figured I might lose here, but Ice Beam freezes, not allowing it to get another attack in, and as a result, Articuno beats Oak. Of the 3 Pokemon, I think Zapdos stacks up best against Oak's teams, just because it has super effective damage against all of his starter Pokemon. I felt Venusaur was going to be the most difficult to face, just because it does know the move Sleep Powder. Drill Peck isn't able to knock out the Executor in 1 hit, and then I have to 2-hit the Arcanine using Thunderbolt. Okay, so will the Venusaur use Sleep Powder? And the answer is no. It goes for Razor Leaf, Zapdos knocks it out in 2 turns, and one-shots the final Gyarados. All that's left is Moltres. Do note it's taking on Oak at a higher level. I'm going to mimic Hypnosis here, just because his team has 2 water types, Blastoise and Gyarados, and they both know Hydro Pump. The Executor puts me to sleep, it wastes a bunch of time, I have to use Rest to heal, I finally knock it out, move on to the Arcanine, use Hypnosis, heal up, and then knock it out using Fly. Okay, time for the Blastoise. Hypnosis successfully puts it to sleep, and then I finish the water type off using Fire Blast. I just don't want it to wake up when I'm in the air. Last is Gyarados, and I think it's fitting that the final Pokemon I defeat in the year in Pokemon Yellow, I do with the aid of Hypnosis. Happy holidays everyone. Daily December continues tomorrow, so I'll see you in that video.